Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Soul Chess in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 71, Talbumasuk's plot, Segunda Etapa Matrix. Third-person POV. After her moment with her sister, Rukia went to the Urahara shop to tell Kyan the good news. It was sundown by the time she reached the cozy candy shop and got a chance to speak with Kyan. As she spoke with him in another room, Renji sat with a cup of hot tea, trying to do his best to pick up what was being discussed. Kyan. It was always Kyan. Rukia, despite the fact that she and Renji were friends, all thanks to Lelouch putting them in the Phantoms, barely could get Rukia's attention, ever. It was always Nasan this or Kyan Dano that. Renji never got his fair share of Rukia's free time and it annoyed him to no end. What aggravated him further was that every time he had tried to be of use he was always upstaged or near useless. In the Phantoms it was always Hisuna protecting Rukia from harm. In the field it was always Kyan. During the time she was pending execution, though Kyan had been an idiot and attacked Ichigo because he believed that Ichigo was incapable of rescuing Rukia and that Kyan had said capability, despite the fact that Ichigo didn't care if he was the one who rescued Rukia or not, he just wanted her to be set free, it was still Kyan whom Rukia thanked in the end. It was Kyan who took Rukia from the execution site in his arms as he ran down the steps of the Sokioku Hill. It was Kyan who refused to show fear in the face of Aizen Sosuke, and it was Kyan that Rukia called brave for his valor and courage and got a peck on the cheek and the sweetest, purest smile from Rukia as thanks for his efforts. And me, what did I get? Renji grumbled to himself. A Bankai I can barely control, still in a sword through my gut from the guy we're now fighting. Kyan took out his 7th most prominent fighter. I can't even contend with the 10th. Some hero I am. It wasn't just Kyan Renji was envious of though, Hisuna was also someone he envied. Until the day Lelouch had reunited Hisuna with Rukia, Renji had been the only pillar of strength Rukia needed, though she rarely made use of it. Once she was a Kukaki, and even when she was a phantom, Rukia would only ever show weakness in front of her sister. At least that's how it appeared to Renji. In reality Hisuna wore her heart on her sleeve and always vocalized her concern towards Rukia, so naturally she'd get the self-raised short Soul Reaper to talk. Kyan also always found a way to put a smile on Rukia's face. All Renji ever did was embarrass himself. At the same time that Renji was training to achieve Bankai, Hisuna was mastering hers, and she even had the courage and the bravery to stand up to their then captain. She stood up to her own husband, who was also one of the most politically powerful men in the Soul Society. She had been willing to cast aside everything for the sake of protecting what really mattered to her. It made Renji feel cowardly in comparison. When he found out that Hisuna and Lelouch were plotting a course into Hueco Mundo under the grounds of rescuing Orium and that Rukia was probably there too, Renji couldn't bring himself to charge headfirst into enemy territory and help her. After all, Kyan was supposedly there as well. Renji's inferiority got the better of him and he wound up not going. And in the end it was Hisuna that ultimately saved Rukia. She did so effortlessly against the 8th Espada. Renji was now gripping his teacup tightly and staring down at the table, clenching his eyes shut as he thought about all of this. Hisuna and Kyan, he was always overshadowed by at least one of them. All of his potential glory, all of his potential chances of showing Rukia that he cared dashed and destroyed because of them. It wasn't long ago when the undesirable happened. Kyan had dropped by Byakuya's office unannounced and Renji was asked to fetch Hisuna so that Kyan could speak with her and Byakuya. Renji, curiosity getting the better of him, eavesdropped on the conversation. Lord and Lady Kukaki, I'd like permission to marry Rukia. Renji collapsed on the ground when Kyan uttered that sentence. It was as if Kyan had just taken a hammer and chisel to Renji's heart, sending a big crack through it. If Kyan married Rukia, then Renji could all but forget about ever being able to have a chance with her. He should have read the signs, he should have made his move decades ago, but every time he thought he'd mustered up the strength he got cold feet at the last second or someone interrupted him. Still, as long as the marriage hasn't been confirmed, I still have a chance. Renji thought to himself as he lazily stared at his tea. If I'm lucky, maybe the marriage between two people of two different noble houses won't be condoned by the Central 46. Renji sighed. It's times like this I wish I had Ikeiku's level of luck. That guy could take a swan dive off the Shrine of Penitence and live to tell about it with injuries no worse than a few dislocated joints. Renji took another sip of his tea, swallowed and sniffed before putting his tea back on the table. Still, if the marriage isn't approved, then this could be my greatest chance. Renji grinned widely. Yeah, this could be my chance. Renji sprung to his feet and began imitating how he would act when Rukia got all teary-eyed because she couldn't marry Kion. Oh Renji, the Central 46 won't let me marry Kion Dano. What do I do? Renji said, doing his best impression of Rukia, which wasn't all that great. He switched to being himself. Don't worry Rukia, you still have me to marry you if no one else will. Oh Renji, really? Of course Rukia, because I'm your best friend. Renji said with a smirk. Best friend huh? The voice of the real Rukia came from behind Renji. Renji turned around to see Rukia standing behind him. The door to the room recently opened. Well, whatever. I have some news I want to share with you. Thankfully for Renji, Rukia had only heard his last statement. She would have most likely punched the living daylights out of him if she had heard the whole thing. What kind of news? Renji asked. Rukia clasped her hands together and her eyes quivered in delight as a luminescent blush appeared on her cheeks. I'm getting married. Married. The word echoed in Renji's head several times over as he felt himself grow small and insignificant while his world grew gray around him. An empty sensation of doom increased with every passing second. He felt as if he was a piece of glass that just began to crack towards the center and eventually shatter into tiny pieces. Despite his internal turmoil, Renji put on his best smile for Rukia. That's great Rukia, I'm happy for you. So who are you marrying? Renji didn't want to act as if he knew in advance. He knew the proposal was supposed to be real hush-hush like. As he could have figured, it was to Kion, but Rukia then added on some information that Renji hadn't expected to hear and it only made things worse. The Central 46 turned down the Kuchikis and the Shibas merging together, so I'm switching houses. I'm going to be a Shiba. The last 5 words out of Rukia's mouth echoed in Renji's head again and struck the vice captain stone grey petrified. Renji felt as if Kion was now looming over him and about to whack him with a mallet that had the inscription, the kanji for the word denied, written in all caps on the bottom. Still, despite this, Renji still smiled, letting his expression betray his emotion. I'm sure you'll make a fine bride Rukia, he said to her. Thank you Renji, I appreciate that, Rukia said. There was nothing in her tone that said she meant otherwise. Anyway, if you'll excuse me, I need to get going. Nei-san said she wants me back before dark and tomorrow we're going to tell the others. As Rukia began to leave the room, Renji realized he had yet to ask a very important question. One moment Rukia. She looked back at him. I'm allowed to come, right? I mean, I'm invited, aren't I? Renji asked. Rukia smiled. Of course you are, you're my best friend, aren't you? Rukia asked, saying those 2 words specifically, mockingly and genuinely at the same. Of course I am. Renji declared triumphantly. Then I'll see you there. Rukia smiled at him. See you later Renji. And just like that, the only girl Renji ever liked was gone. Even if he saw her again, all of his chances of ever being with her, gone. Renji realized that he had lost this competition. He was about to sink into despair, crawl into a fetal position, mourn his loss, and forget it by morning when he remembered something important. Hisuna always wants what's best for Rukia, and that means she'd look for a fiancé for her sister that could protect her best. If I could somehow prove that I'm better than Kion, then Hisuna would have to cancel the marriage in favor of me. But I have to be subtle about it. I can't let Kion think that I'm doing this because of Rukia. What should I do? What can I do? Something the matter Renji? Kion asked, walking into the room behind his same-ranked comrade. Without thinking, Renji whirled around, pointed at Kion with his index finger and shouted, Shiba Fukotaikyo, I challenge you to a duel. Oh, you play? Kion said with a smirk. Huh? Play? Renji was confused. What? That's the code phrase, remember? Kion held up a stack of trading cards with brown and gold backs with a large black cylinder in the center. It's the newest craze in the world of the living here. I haven't been playing that long. Kyokaku's actually the one that got me into it. But I. Listen Renji, Kyan said and put a hand on Renji's shoulder. His expression became not unlike that of unknownness. You wouldn't want me to think you were trying to prove you were better than me, would you? I mean, my sister does have some of the most interesting information on you. What would Rukia think if she knew about? Okay, I get it. Renji backed off. I'll be right back. Renji ran out of the door for his Jigai and quickly made his way to the nearest card shop. 2 days later. Hueco Mundo. Upon analyzing Ulquiorra's cellular structure and Reishi composition, after comparing it against the rest of the top 3 Espada, Talbumasuk was able to deduct that not only was Ulquiorra the greatest at regeneration in his entire troop, but that he, as suspected, possessed a second release similar to that of a Soul Reaper's Bankai. Talbumasuk couldn't deduct the shape or form of said release, but he could easily tell Ulquiorra had one. The question was, how was he going to take this current knowledge and use it to his advantage? There was no way he was going to get this right on his first try. He needed a test subject that would not be missed if it were destroyed, that he could monitor and field test and see the destructive potential of. Just as Sensei needed the substantial amount of test subjects before he could create fully functional Arrancar, so too do I need the proper amount of Arrancar to test this on. The problem is, how and who should I test? Talbumasuk folded his arms as he thought of this. He then loaded up a list of all 70 Arrancar at his disposal and began going through the list to try and find one that would ultimately be the perfect test subject. He finally landed on one, Gantenbin Musqueta. He was a Privaran Espada that had fought with Sato Yasutura when Kurosaki Ichigo and his friends invaded Hueco Mundo. Sato left him injured, but alive, and Gantenbin was on his way to recovery. As a former Espada, it meant that Gantenbin once held the capabilities to be an Espada, and that made him the perfect test subject for his goals. Talbumasuk thought, but I'd dare not test his abilities against my own forces. There's no need to pit my subordinates against one another. I don't need another setback. He grinned. I suppose I'll have to go and send him to where my arch-nemesis is stationed. Gantenbin will simply bear a message. His message will be the foreshadowing of the complete and utter destruction of the Soul Society. Talbumasuk made a gurgling noise in his throat. It then turned into a snicker, which then became laughter, which in turn became mad laughter at the fantasy of this one experiment wiping out Lelich and his entire squadron. It was after a few seconds of laughter that Talbumasuk instantly stopped himself, flung his arms out in front of him and pinched the bridge of his nose. I have got to stop doing that. Perhaps it's time I switched to decaf, or maybe I'll start engorging myself with apples. If only they weren't so tasteless here. 2 days later. Karakura Town. It was after school and martial arts practice was being undergone. Tatsuki was on her way to becoming a junior instructor. If she kept up her training, she'd be able to stand by her sensei as a fellow master of the Hakuda arts, or rather the styles of martial arts that it was composed of. As Tatsuki practiced with her fellow black belts in perfect unison, she kept thinking about what happened in Hueco Mundo and what happened about a week ago. She had let that beast inside her get the better of her, committed to an action of violent, psychopathic, merciless overkill. When Tatsuki burned Dordonii and Rudobon, she had done so in a fashion that she had killed them before they could feel how excruciatingly painful her attacks were, but Kaibun had held Luppy up and burned him. She stood there and watched him burn, reveling in his pain before utterly throwing him into the ground. Kaibun was sadistic. Tatsuki knew she couldn't possibly be that cruel. The monster that lurked inside her was not her. To add to her internal turmoil, it had been about a week since Ichigo and Orium had become an official couple. Every weekday, after school, Orium would follow Ichigo to Matsukura Hospital and watch him train with Lelich. On weekends, Orium would bring Ichigo a nice bento and eat lunch with him when Lelich finally cut the Tina break. Meanwhile, Tatsuki was forced to wallow in her limitations. With her busy schedule, all thanks to taking off so much time from school, she had to stay focused until the winter break. Then, for sure, she could pick her training back up. She wasn't as academically successful as Ichigo. Tatsuki wasn't even in the top 50, so she couldn't just take the afternoons off and train the days away, not like he and Chad were. According to Chad, he was comfortable in his own strength. Before going up against the 8th Espada, he had taken a severe beating from Gantenbin before ultimately plowing him into the ground, so he wasn't in top form when he fought Zamari. That said, Chad was confident enough in his own ability to handle himself during the fight. Tatsuki wasn't though. Chad and Ichigo always fought, even it was against different enemies, for the same purpose. It was if Chad was an extension of Ichigo's willpower and vice versa. It was different for Ichigo and Tatsuki. When they fought together, the other took comfort in knowing that they had someone right at their back, in sync with their every move. Ichigo and Tatsuki were a duo that no one could counter, except for perhaps Rukia. Tatsuki had the realm of combat covered pretty well, but there's some sort of connection between Tatsuki and Ichigo that had the teen never act as blunt around him as Rukia did. Tatsuki knew what it was. Rukia could act properly as a friend, a close friend of the opposite gender, and had no problem being just that. Tatsuki realized she wasn't like that. She had this epiphany over the weekend. She realized that because she liked Ichigo that she always wanted to be his number one, number two. He always looked out for her and everyone else. Rukia had a way of trading off who was in charge between her and Ichigo, and while Tatsuki could get just as snappy as she couldn't take that extra step to stand above Ichigo in a conflict, and it was because she liked him. It had been like this since middle school. Whenever Ichigo inevitably got involved in her business, he always took charge of the situation and made himself out to be a hero. Tatsuki scolded him for it every time, telling him how she didn't need him babying her and that she could just as easily take care of herself. And then he'd always bring up that stupid promise. Tatsuki didn't think of the promise she and Ichigo made 6 years ago as stupid, but once he said that it was like nothing ever mattered. I was just doing what we promised we would do. If you needed my help, I'd help you. If I needed your help, you help me. You said that as long as we were friends that it would always be that way. Tatsuki's face turned charmed. He said that every time, and it always made me feel as if it didn't matter that he had gone from supporting me from behind to making the situation personal. He was just trying to help. The same of course didn't hold true for the reverse. Tatsuki always acted as Ichigo's second when the two got into a situation together. She respected the honor code of not getting too bogged down in someone else's business. Most of the time Tatsuki was volunteering her help anyway, and Ichigo just accepted it wordlessly. But now things were different. All of a sudden Tatsuki felt as if she couldn't be near Ichigo anymore. She had switched seats with Mizuru and sat at the end of the table. When Tatsuki realized Orium's feelings towards her lifelong friend, she realized how much more Ichigo meant to Orium than he meant to Tatsuki herself. In truth, Tatsuki had encouraged Orium to gather her courage to confess to Ichigo about her true feelings. She didn't think it would take a case of almost serious rape to bring them close together. Nevertheless, it got the job done. And yet, I can't be happy for her. Tatsuki thought to herself, frowning with a depressed look while the rest of her body followed the routine. I don't understand, I just want Ichigo to be happy and he's happy with Orium, so why do I feel so depressed? I don't love him to the same degree that she does. I'm stronger than this. I can handle rejection. So why do I feel like I've given up something I never realized I had, or that, I feel like, I really do, want to have Ichigo for a boyfriend? I'm so confused. Class ended and so iPhone dismissed everyone, reminding those, like Tatsuki, that the junior instructor qualification exams would be held at the beginning of next semester and the exams themselves would be at the start of the new school year, and those that passed both would be rewarded with the black uniform and black and gold belt that So iPhone wore when she instructed the class. At the end of the announcement, like she did with Ichigo 6 years ago, So iPhone told Tatsuki to stay put. Tatsuki stood on the mats, waiting for everyone to leave, and waited to see what So iPhone wanted with her. She wasn't expecting So iPhone to suddenly come dashing towards her with an angled straight punch aimed towards Tatsuki's head. Instinctively Tatsuki bent over backwards and planted her hands firmly on the ground. She grabbed So iPhone's wrist with the inside of her ankles and used the grip to chuck So iPhone over her. She crumpled into a ball and guarded her head to make sure So iPhone wouldn't retaliate while thrown. Tatsuki rolled forward when she felt So iPhone's shadow pass over her and sprang to her feet. She threw a kick just in time to block another punch from her sensei. She threw a punch of her own only to have So iPhone block it with her arm and shove it aside. So iPhone jumped a few inches off the ground and made to attack Tatsuki in the stomach with both her feet. Tatsuki wrapped her arms around So iPhone's feet and sucked her stomach in. She then let So iPhone go and jumped to the side as So iPhone spun her legs in a windmill motion in the air, with only one hand being used to keep her upright. Tatsuki ran forward, grabbed her sensei by the leg, flipped her over and pinned her to the ground, panting. So iPhone smirked. "Nice job. That was 20% of my Hakuda only strength this time, not bad." Tatsuki let go of her sensei and helped her to her feet. "What was that all about?" Tatsuki asked, brushing some dust off her uniform. "Thought you were going soft on me." So iPhone said. "You seemed distracted during class. I was testing your reflexes. Nice to know you haven't dulled out." I would never." Tatsuki saluted. "To space out in the middle of your teachings would be a great dishonesty to you, sensei. Please, forgive my impudence. Hey, no harm no foul, but if something's bothering you, I'd like to know what's going on, especially if it's going to interfere with your effectiveness in the upcoming battle. I've already spoken to your Yuaki-sama, so I know about that. Other you, I guess you could call it." So iPhone said. "Other, me?" Tatsuki asked. "Your Yuaki-sama described that you lost control of your powers once and another persona took control of you. You became something like a killing machine and you were completely out of control. She said it took twice the power she had been using against you up to that point to subdue you and knock you out. Whatever that thing is inside you, you need to take control of it." So iPhone said. "That's easier said than done." Tatsuki shouted. I know. So iPhone eased her. "However, if anyone could have a solution and an explanation as to why this is happening, I'm sure Kisuke would definitely know. After the winter holidays, but before the new year, or after the new year, your choice, seek him out and get this thing under control. The last thing I want to have to do is take down an ally. Understand?" "Hi." Tatsuki nodded. "Good." So iPhone said. "Now then," she put her arm around Tatsuki, "let's you and me get some coffee and then I'll walk you home." The master and pupil then left the dojo. 2 days later. Hueco Mundo. Talbumasuke currently had Gantenbin in stasis, using the same chamber Mia's new body had emerged from, as he calibrated, giving Gantenbin Segunda Etapa, as Ulquiorra coined the term. With Kira now the one in charge of sales labs, the Novena and the leader of the Arrancar army were working diligently to turn Gantenbin into a colossus of mass destruction. Once Talbumasuke was certain the upgrade was successful, he planned to send Gantenbin to the world of the living and combat Lelich's forces. He would show to the murderer of his sensei just what he would be up against and the power he was dealing with. As the readings increased and the project drew near success, Kira began giggling and trying his best not to break out into maniacal laughter. "Could you hold your laughter for 5 minutes?" Talbumasuke slandered. My apologies, boss," Kira said, holding his laughter back as he spoke. Talbumasuke sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Yeah, he's the perfect replacement for Sale, all right. Both of them are widely intelligent and widely insane." An alert popped up onto one of the monitors Kira was looking at. Hey boss. Come take a look at this." Talbumasuke read the alert, which was a warning that Gantenbin's Ryutsu level wasn't strong enough to properly maintain the Segunda Etapa indefinitely and that prolonged usage could result in several unknown side effects. It also asked if Talbumasuke still wished to continue with this procedure. Of course I do. Gantenbin should thank his lucky stars he's even alive to continue to serve under me. Kurosaka's friend was a bit soft if you ask me, not like that other girl, Arisawa. She has killer instincts befitting of even some of the more ruthless hollows. Still, instinct will only get you so far. Talbumasuke hit the proceed button and the upgrade began to continue. The digital white outline on the panel of one of the monitors of Gantenbin's body flashed red and then black, then red again and then dulled out, and the frame spun around, increasing with speed every passing second. Kira began to find it harder and harder to control his laughter as the procedure came closer and closer to completion. "Would you please keep yourself under control?" Talbumasuke ordered again. "Alright, sorry," Kira said, followed by nervous laughter. Talbumasuk groaned and then walked over to the stasis machine, which was now glowing. Any second now, Talbumasuk said with a slight smile. The glowing continued to increase to the point where most would have been blinded for life from the bright whiteness being emitted, but souls were above such things. The stasis pod finally opened and Gantenbin walked out into the open. His afro was thick and he looked, in a word, groovy. Outwardly and inwardly he hadn't changed much at all, but Talbumasuk could tell from the scanners, unless they were lying and scanners never lied, not the high-tech ones he would be a force to be reckoned with against the forces in the world of the living. And now you can laugh, Talbumasuk said to Kira with a smirk. Kira flung his arms out wide, fingers spread apart. It worked, he said giggling. It's alive. Wahahaha. Sup, Gantenbin said in the most badass way possible. How do you feel? Talbumasuk asked. Gantenbin threw a punch. I feel no dos cientos% stronger. He did a high kick and then slammed his foot onto the ground, spreading his legs apart and bending his knees and holding his fists at his sides. You give me a target at Tremere-sama and I will. He threw a punch, threw another one, he turned and did an uppercut, down. He spun and did a jumping uppercut only to spin on his feet and hunch over with his fingers clutching in anticipation to start up a tussle with someone. It's like something out of video game, only this is real life. Kira annotated. Talbumasuk shot him a glare. Right, no talking, he backed away and slunk down, I understand. Gantenbin, Talbumasuk said flipping on a viewing monitor showing a bird's eye view of Karakura town. You are going to go to Karakura town to test out your new power. Do not hold back for even a second. If Yasutara Sato could defeat you in your release form then you must start at full strength if you wish to be effective at all. Do you understand? Talbumasuk asked him. Yes sir. Gantenbin saluted. Good, get going. Talbumasuk said. Gantenbin nodded and opened a garganta. He began his march towards the human world. Talbumasuk grabbed a swivel chair, plopped down into it and widened the monitor view. Pull up a chair Kira. Let's enjoy the show shall we? Yes sir. Kira announced. He opened up a cabinet and grabbed a bag of barbecue potato chips and sat down in a chair. He tore open the package and ruthlessly munched on a chip. Talbumasuk slid over to a table near the front entrance of the lab and picked up a cup of coffee that had just finished brewing before sliding back towards the monitor. He took a sip of his coffee. So how will you fare Captain of Squad 10, Lamperouge Lelich? Whether or not my creation is defeated all of the battle data will be transmitted immediately to my database so whether you win or lose it is I who wins either way. To be continued. Chapter 72, Lelich's White Christmas. Third-person POV. It was snowing that day in Karakura town, and because it was close to the holidays, Lelich gave Ichigo the next 3 days off in respect of the holidays. He told Ichigo he had earned a small vacation and for those same days Lelich also needed to get gifts for the people he cared about as well, not to mention that Urahara and Yoriyuki's birthdays were coming up as well. Lelich was disappointed he couldn't help Hitsugaya and Yukatake celebrate their birthdays, but that's the price one pays when they're out in the field. Ichigo dodged a bullet thanks to the quick thinking of his sisters who got his Hina present from all 3 siblings. All the winter birthdays that had come and gone made Lelich think back to his own birthday and how nature had given him the worst present ever, news that Susanna has miscarried her baby. Of all days of the year, Lelich felt as if nature itself was punishing him for making him find out that particular news on that day. As the Brighton Neon captain wandered through the streets, he stared up at the snowy sky and began to think back of a very fond memory on this same day to what seemed to be a lifetime ago for him. It was one of his earliest memories. Pendragon, 2002 ATB. Lelich was 3 years old and it was Nunnally's first snowfall. The young Brighton Neon prince stumbled out in his thick black snowsuit, wearing a blue and red wool cap, into the world of white. Marianne was wearing a thick coyote fur coat and silver scarf as she cradled little Nunnally all wrapped up in a warm blanket. Lelich decided he was going to build a family of snowmen to look, to the best of his ability, his mom, his sister, and him. However, as he bent down to gather some snow a flying snowball soared through the air and whacked him in the back of the head, pushing him head first right into the snow. Lelich got up and brushed the snow off his face to see Cornelia standing in her uniform and earmuffs a good ways away from his mom. He scowled and lobbed a snowball at her, but it plopped down no more than a few inches from his body. Cornelia laughed and pushed a lock of hair behind her earlobe. "I see you're still having hand-eye coordination trouble, Lelich," she teased. "Oh, Cornelia, what a nice surprise." Marianne smiled at her. "Will you be staying for the holidays?" Cornelia nodded. "Yeah, the semester is over, so I've been cut loose." Cornelia noticed the blanket Marianne was holding. "Ah, is that Nunnally?" She trotted towards Marianne and looked at the half-year-old princess. "Ah, that's right, this is your first time seeing her, isn't it, Cornelia?" Marianne smiled. "She's so adorable," Cornelia said, and then pressed her face close to Nunnally and began babbling, pretending to communicate with her, which made Nunnally giggle and laugh. "Why did you hit me?" Lelich finally got the courage to ask. His older half-sister intimidated the toddler, military personnel, and all. "Oh, Lelich, it was all in good fun. I didn't think you'd fall over into the snow." Cornelia put her hand to her mouth, trying not to laugh. "Yeah, well, she better apologize." Lelich huffed, turning his back on his sister. "I'm sorry." Cornelia apologized, laughing mid-sentence. Present day. Lelich smiled as he looked up at the falling snow, recalling the memory. With Cornelia's help he made really good sculptures, and Cornelia even took a picture and submitted the sculpture to the Winter Art Festival, only being beat out by some hand-drawn pictures of Clovis. Lelich's smile suddenly turned to a frown and he walked forward down the street. "But those memories were never meant to be," Lelich said. "They were but a fleeting moment of my destined future. I was cast out from my family and left to die." Flashing images of his mother's murder appeared in his mind. So many cold winters, so many lonely nights. Just Nunnally and me, alone in the world. Lelich thought of the many years he had to take care of Nunnally by himself. It was a struggle for us. I wonder, did I act properly? What if I had stayed in Britannia, would those memories have continued? Or would I have been just as lonely, even closer to those I despised? Or, would I have been stood alongside, supported? Cornelia, you were Mom's biggest supporter. Why didn't you help me? I was so alone. Fond memories of Lelich and his half-sister protruded into his mind. Lelich sighed. I suppose it doesn't matter. He smirked. Heh, here I am dwelling on the past when I always strive myself to look towards the future. But, Lelich stood still and looked up at the sky. What do you do, when the past becomes the future? Excuse me. A voice called out and woman ran up to Lelich. She was dressed in a thick purple coat and had black hair styled in a ponytail. She appeared to be somewhere in her mid to late 30s. You seem like a decent young man, she said. You haven't seen a small boy running around by himself, have you? She put her hand down by her thigh. He's about this tall, with black hair, answers to the name of Kaoru. Lelich shook his head. Sorry, I haven't. He answered. Why are you looking for him? He's my son. We were in the shopping mall together earlier. I saw you there, you were helping one of the cashiers when one of the registers went on a fritz, so. Lelich smiled. Say no more, he put up a hand. Do you want help finding him? That depends, are you offering your help to me? The woman asked. I'd be disinclined not to. Lelich said and stuck out his hand. Lamprouje Lelich. Akumi, Anagaya Akumi. The mother shook Lelich's hand. So, do you know where your son might be? Lelich asked. Akumi scratched her head. I don't know and I'm really worried about him. All right, just stay calm, we'll find him. Lelich said. He scratched his head. Judging by the height she gave earlier, he's probably an elementary school child, and considering she's open to asking random people on the street for help, I'd venture she's a single mom. That said, Lelich cupped his chin, she might have done a bang-up job raising him, so maybe. Lelich came to a conclusion. I have an idea, he said. Follow me. Okay. Lelich doubled back to the shopping mall he was just at, where he picked up a bunch of presents. He then went around the corner of the edge of the street the mall was on and walked down 1 block and down the street on the same block as the mall where there was an arcade 2 blocks down. Standing in front of the Demons and Devils machine was a boy just as Akumi described. "Is that him?" Lelich pointed. Akumi's face lit up. "Kaoru." She ran up to him and hugged him, picking him up, randomly spouting off words of affection. He immediately began struggling as he watched his character die on screen. Mom," he complained. Akumi put him down and bopped him on the head. "What did I say?" she scolded. "I said we would go to the arcade after Mommy was finished shopping, didn't I? You are in big trouble when we get home." "Ah, but Mom." "No buts." Akumi scolded. She grabbed Kaoru by the wrist and led him to the arcade entrance. She was about to thank Lelich for his good deed, but he was nowhere in sight. "Mom, is something wrong?" Kaoru asked her. Akumi shook her head. "It's nothing. Though I guess, someone knows what it's like to be a giving person during the holiday season." Lelich had wanted to stay of course, but duty called him elsewhere. He had Ryo run off for Matsukura Hospital, while Lelich began making his way for the signal in the northwest end of the Kitakawa's district, the signal's source. The Aaron car was rather weak compared to the last assault, so Lelich figured that if he was the only one there that he could take care of it, but that if others showed up he could observe the Aaron car and take down some mental notes to start helping him put together an updated version of his algorithm to assist with Aaron car information. As he made his way there though, the signal increased by a factor of 25. Lelich slowed his approach. The signal being emitted was now incredibly powerful. Before it hadn't been stronger than a lieutenant at full power, but now the signal was reaching Ryotsu levels close to Kenpeiga without his eye patch on. Lelich immediately applied for Gentei Kaijo and activated his Bankai. He went post-haste towards the location of the enemy. Lelich arrived to witness Uryu getting his lights punched out by the enemy. The Aaron car in question appeared to have already released its form, but there was something about it that didn't sit right with Lelich. The Aaron car had a shell over its back and arms with a bone-like tail running down. Large, sword blade-sized spikes coated the shell and cell phone-sized spikes coated the arms and tail. The Aaron car had a bushy afro and a visor with a star on it over its eyes. It had claws on the backs of its hands, the middle and ring finger claws were extended off past the Aaron car's fingers. Well, the Aaron car pivoted his position, kicking up dust towards Lelich who had to block with his force field to prevent his small frame from being blown off the ground. "Looks like someone else wants to play." "Who are you?" Lelich asked. "The name's Gantenbin Musqueta. Yo soy Aaron car, 107. Gantenbin said. "So you're a Priv Aaron then? I don't suppose you can tell me then how you seem to emit Ryotsu of higher levels than some of the lower tier Espada." Lelich said. Gantenbin took a judo stance. "This is a new form that a Tremere-sama has designed for us Aaron car. It's called Segunda Etapa." "Segunda Etapa? Second stage?" Lelich thought, knowing Spanish. Does this mean Talbumasuk has found a second release for the Aaron car equal to a Soul Reaper's Bankai? Damn. This isn't good. If that's the case I have to completely rethink how we're going to handle this. This guy's just a Priv Aaron and he's emitting Ryotsu greater than the Aaron car I fought in Hueco Mundo. If that's the case we could be in serious trouble. Forget 10, if Talbumasuk has even 5 Vastolords level Aaron car on his side, we might as well kiss our asses goodbye. If you're my next opponent then make your attack. I will strike you down." Gantenbin taunted. "We'll see about that." Lelich disappeared instantly and attacked Gantenbin at the Aaron car's 10 o'clock. The shell repelled all of Lelich's fireballs. Gantenbin fired off yellow blasts of energy from off of the spikes on his shell. Lelich blocked with his cape, absorbing most of the shots and then transferred the absorbed energy into a blast of energy, but Gantenbin suddenly disappeared and before Lelich knew it Gantenbin was in the air behind him. Gantenbin extended his right arm out and blasted Lelich with a blast of energy charged in between his extended claw. Lelich quickly put up his force field, but Gantenbin shattered through it and the remainder of the shield and blasted Lelich in the chest. Gantenbin then blasted Lelich with a blast from his left arm and sent him spiraling across the air before Lelich could recover since the previous blast has shocked his nervous system. Here comes the Cinco-step combo, Gantenbin announced. He rushed in on Lelich before the captain could react. Uno. He kicked Lelich firmly in the gut, knocking the wind right out of him. Dos. He brought his elbow down on Lelich back. Tres. He kneed Lelich in the jaw. Cuatro. He hammered Lelich with both his fists right below the captain's neckline, sending Lelich slamming into the ground. Cinco. He charged an orange Ciro and fired it at Lelich. I won't make it. Lelich wide-eyed in terror as the orange beam came barreling towards him. He watched the Ciro explode as the brightness blinded him. Dust kicked up everywhere, but Lelich soon realized that he wasn't dead. Someone had jumped into the fray right at the last second. From his position, all Lelich could see was a pair of tight black tights with a white aura circulating around them. Lelich, when will you learn that you're not a frontline fighter? His rescuer asked him. Lelich recognized the voice. Yuriuki. The rest of the dust cleared, revealing the slim, nubile form of the former captain of Squad 2, Shihoin Yuriuki. Gantenbin saw the dark-skinned woman before him. He saw the white aura around her and the lack of tight black sleeveless shirt and black pants. The weather wasn't keeping Yuriuki down at all. He also noticed that she seemed to have received no damage from his Ciro. You, who are you? Me. Yuriuki asked with a smile. I'm just a passerby who saw my friend here in trouble, she said. Just a passerby? Gantenbin was both disturbed and confused. Oh, Yuriuki said, already at Gantenbin's 5 o'clock, and I'm also the former captain of Squad 2, Shihoin Yuriuki. With a fearsome kick, Yuriuki landed the front of her leg right into Gantenbin's armor, cracking it like pick driven into a block of cement. Gantenbin attacked Yuriuki with the energy blasts from off of his spikes, but Yuriuki was already on his opposite flank. With a fierce battle cry, she punched Gantenbin right in the side of the face and then, landing in front of him, crouched down, she performed a somersault kick and the front of her foot smashed itself into Gantenbin's cheek. She stood in place and then let out a flurry of rapid-fire kicks into Gantenbin's torso and face before ending the strike with a fierce, low punch to his gut, sending him flying. Lelich got up and shook off the numbness and pain he was feeling and just watched Yuriuki fight. He heard that ever since he had left the Phantoms that she and iPhone had doubled their training efforts, and though she hadn't trained for the last few years, all of that training with Tatsuki had gotten her back in shape. In other words, Shihoin Yuriuki was fighting at 100%. She's incredible. Lelich watched as Yuriuki executed fighting talent without a Zanpakuto he couldn't hope to match even with Bankai. Standing in front of Gantenbin, Yuriuki somersaulted over a rapid release of energy from his spikes, dodging the assault effortlessly, and then brought her feet firmly into Gantenbin's face. An involuntary reflex caused Gantenbin's tail to shoot up into the air too, which Yuriuki spun with one leg out and cracked it in half. Then she widened the distance between her and Gantenbin and threw his spine-like tail at his back, piercing into his shell a good distance in. Damn, he's got some tough armor, Yuriuki thought to herself. She sighed. Guess there's no helping it. She reached into her cleavage and pulled out something black. It was a scabbard, and attached to it was a sword with a black handle with a square guard. Is that? Yuriuki glanced down at her sword. It's been a while since I've used this. Till now I've never thought I've needed to use it between Shunko and my own natural ability, but it looks like, Gantenbin turned around and fired forward a beam of bright yellow energy, that's no longer an option. Quick as lightning, Yuriuki drew her sword from its sheath and with a two-handed cut slashed Gantenbin's attack in half. She then put her sword back in its scabbard and crouched down low. Hey you, show me your best technique. I wanna see if I can outrun it. You've got a lot of guts, former captain. You want my greatest technique? Fine, dodge this. Gantenbin locked his fists together and let the four extended claws on his wrists charge yellow energy until a powerful stream of lightning, half as fast as a bala with several times the strength of a Ciro, but less than half the radius covered by one shot forth towards Yuriuki. Yuriuki simply smirked. Heh, too slow. She was suddenly on the opposite side of Gantenbin. She was now standing upright with her sword out at her right side. Hitosuum, Yuriuki said and held up her scabbard to sheath her blade, Nadegiri. She sheathed the blade and Gantenbin soon found his stomach sliced wide open. Yuriuki disappeared again. Lelich's eyes could barely keep up as he saw a blurring streak appear around Gantenbin several times and Yuriuki to suddenly come tearing across the sky away from the Arrancar's ninth. A streak of her aura seemed to be passed under Gantenbin's feet and was attached to Yuriuki's heel. She brought up her leg and cut the energy chain, causing an explosion to erupt from under Gantenbin's feet as many of his spikes were sliced off his body and tumbled to the ground, accompanied by 4 lacerations. In the world of swordsmanship we call that the Yaban Kami Narikero. Savage Lightning Circuit. With his tail lodged into his shell and many of his spikes cut off, Gantenbin had lost most of the advantages granted to him by his Segunda Etapa. Unwilling to continue carry the heavy shell, he discarded it and created 2 monstrous-sized gauntlets along his arms. I will kill you, Shihoin Yuriuki. You should watch yourself, Arrancar. I didn't come here alone. Yuriuki said with her arms folded. Gantenbin wasn't prepared or aware when a Petit Soul Reaper with a single golden gauntlet on her right arm and long ink black hair came at him from behind. He never even saw his assailant coming, nor was he aware of her presence. Nijeki Kesatsu. So iPhone recited in her head. She dove right at Gantenbin's back and before he could blink cut him with an X pattern with her Suzumibuki. Gantenbin stopped dead in his tracks and crashed along the air, crumpling in front of Yuriuki, who smiled down at him. As the poison took its full course and his mouth opened and he spasmed on the ground, Yuriuki waved at him with a smile. But bye. And then Gantenbin disintegrated. Yuriuki looked at So iPhone. That was excellent work, So iPhone. Why you praise me too highly, Yuriuki-sama? I was nothing compared to you. So iPhone bowed, in her own mind, to her superior. Yuriuki smiled and both women shunpoed to the ground. Yuriuki helped Lelich support himself with her shoulder as the captain disengaged his Bankai. You know, for a guy who could plan out a way to corner and defeat Aizen, that has to be the stupidest thing you've done. Yuriuki said. I guess captaincy has gotten to my head. Lelich laughed. Just had to test my limitations, you know. Hey, at least you held down the fort till we got here, that's what matters after all. Yuriuki said. Yeah, I guess so. Lelich said. So what's say we get you back in your Jigai and treat you to some hot chocolate? Yurikai said. Sounds good to me. Lelich agreed. He accepted Yuriuki and So iPhone's hospitality, with a little bit of friendly nagging from Kyokaku for letting himself get so utterly thrashed, and then finished his day by getting the rest of the presents he wanted to get for everyone and used Kyoko to hide them on the top level of the warehouse where they would stay until tomorrow evening. Hueco Mundo. Talbumasuk rose to his feet. He was not happy. Yuriuki had completely and utterly thrashed Gantenbin without the Privaran being able to put up much of a fight. The only valuable data he was able to recover at least was that Lelich proved ineffective against Gantenbin even with Bankai, and he had managed to eliminate a resurrection-activated Sail with only Shikai. However, it seemed even the famous Shihoin Yuriuki was hard-pressed to fight without her Zanpakuto, so that was something to note. Still, he had hoped for a longer show than this, at the very least something to point to the warning he was given right before he awakened Gantenbin. Sighing, he began to leave the room. Where are you going, boss? Kira asked him. To my study. I have some thinking to do as to what to do with this data and how I'm going to use it to power up you and the rest of the Espada. Talbumasuk said and walked out. 2 days later. Christmas Day. Ichigo woke up that morning to the reception of his first Christmas present. Merry Yi Christmas Ichigo. Ishine, in a Santa outfit, minus the hat, leapt up from a trampoline into Ichigo's bedroom. Ichigo, however, having learned how to sense spirit energy even while sleeping, woke up and dodged his dad's attack and rolled over. He grabbed the edge of his desk and pulled himself to his feet. In recognition of the holiday spirit, I'm going to do the right thing and not kick your ass. Ichigo grumbled as he put his slippers on. Ishine manly headlock attack. Ishine grabbed Ichigo from behind and trapped his son in said headlock. The two broke out into a brawl, the shockwaves of which were transferring downstairs where everyone else was already sitting around the kitchen table. It was 11 a.m. and Ishine had decided that he wasn't going to let Ichigo sleep his entire Christmas away. Yuzu helped Hisuna bake special Christmas cookies, and Hisuna had prepared a special blend of warm apple cider and cinnamon, which both of Ichigo's younger sisters thought was delicious, as did Rukia. Both Kukaki sisters were wearing a Santa hat. Yuzu was wearing reindeer antlers. Karen was just wearing a black t-shirt over a red turtleneck, looking as bored as ever. Ichigo and his Heinz fight carried themselves down the stairs with Ichigo over his old man's back with his Heinz arm bent behind his back. "Hey! Stop fighting, you two!" Yuzu complained. "It's Christmas. Tell that to him," Ichigo and his Heinz said at the same time. "Me? You started it." "Did not." The brawl continued, much to Yuzu's chagrin and Rukia's entertainment. She took another sip of her warm cider and then spoke to her sister. "Sane-san, did Lelouch say where we were meeting today?" Rukia asked. Late last night, Lelouch had sent out a message to Rukia, Hisuna and the rest of his forward unit, and to Ichigo and his friends that he was going to host a party in honor of the holiday. Christmas time was always a fond memory of Lelouch's. No matter how rough the times were, he could always count on being able to make it a special day for him and Nunnally. The only bad memory he had was during his 18th Christmas, during the time of which that he was living his lie of a life and believed that Rollo was his actual brother. On that day, Millie walked right up to him and held a mistletoe over his head. The incident exploded into Shirley, who had had a couple of rounds of eggnog that Millie had snuck into the student council pavilion, diving onto her like a crazy bitch, and the two got involved in a wrestling match. The mistletoe went flying through the air and got caught on the chandelier where, as Lelouch's luck had it, he and Rivaltz were standing underneath. Nina, seeing this, as he and Rivaltz casually stepped away from the mistletoe like nothing happened, only for Millie to try and force the two of them together and take a picture. Thankfully Rollo and Shirley got involved and stopped it before Violeta wound up breaking into the area and confiscated the eggnog and gave Millie a good finger wagging. The only reason Lelouch considered this a bad memory was because it was the only Christmas he celebrated, while alive, without Nunnally. Well, that and the fact that he almost had to kiss Rivaltz. So to celebrate the holiday he sent out an extension of a party, but Rukia could not recall if he said where to meet. Hisuna checked her soul pager for texts. "Let's see, here we go, just this morning before we woke up." "Let's see, that's weird," Hisuna said, looking at the message. "Hey Ichigo." She called him over. Now having an excuse to leave his and his dad's brawl, Ichigo walked over to Hisuna, who showed him the picture on his phone. It was a large dome-like building shaped like an upside-down bike helmet. "Hey, yeah, that's the open stage stadium in Matsuda Square. It just reopened a few years ago after being shut down for 20. Why? Seems like Lelouch rented out the whole place for the party." "All of it?" Ichigo was surprised. "That's what he says. Seems kind of big for a party of less than 30 people." Hisuna said. "A party? Can we come?" Yuzu said. "Sorry Yuzu," Ichigo apologized, "this is a special thing with me and my friends. Maybe next time. I'll be home for dinner though." "That's right Yuzu, I'll be gone with Ichigo and Rukia today, so I'm counting on you to make something delicious for dinner, okay?" Hisuna said. "Yes. I'll make the best dinner ever." Yuzu was excited because it was her first chance to cook by herself ever since Hisuna had moved back in. "You might want to get dressed so we can get going," Rukia said to Ichigo. "Lelouch said we can arrive as early as noon." All right," Ichigo said and went upstairs to get dressed. At the stadium, Lelouch was waiting for everyone to arrive. The only person currently there with him, dressed up in a Santa suit of her own, was Kyokaku. She had helped Lelouch put the whole thing together and she had supplied him with the proper money needed to pay off the owners of the pavilion. The two had planned the entire affair ever since the beginning of the month. Kyokaku had worked tirelessly, with Tessai, Yururu and Hinta's help to transform the stadium. The quartet had managed to create an ice rink, a luxurious buffet. The greatest thing about the stadium was that despite the fact that the party would be outside on such a cold day, that only held true for the performance floor. The seats in the many rows of seats were all behind a thick glass at this time of year, and of course there were several suites in the stadium that were also warm and cozy. Tessai, Yururu, and Hinta would be coming to the party with Urahara later with all of the presents. It was the shopkeeper's idea. Lelich and Kyokaku had arrived early since this was their idea from the get-go, so that made them the host and hostess of the party. Kyokaku was sitting in a chair smoking on mint leaves with her pipe while Lelich was reading the play, A Christmas Carol. Guests began arriving at noon, starting with Yoriyuki and So-iPhone. Both were impressed by the amazing setup Lelich and Kyokaku had managed to put together. Yoriyuki was wearing a dark brown jacket while So-iPhone wore a black one. Renji and Kyan arrived next. Kyan commented about if Kyokaku was trying to show off, given what she was wearing, and received a headlock for his troubles. Renji was wearing a dark purple jacket and black turtleneck. Kyan was wearing a black flannel jacket and a blue long-sleeved shirt. Both were wearing jeans. Rangiku, Susanna, and Orium arrived next. Orium was wearing a bright pink turtleneck with a brown coat while Susanna was wearing a dark yellow wool sweater and insulating, tight yellow pants. Rangiku, of course, was following Susanna's example. She immediately helped herself to the eggnog. Susanna invited Lelich to ice skate with her. He obliged. Uriah showed up wearing a white coat and turtleneck. He also brought an oven-roasted turkey his grandfather insisted he bring. Kyokaku directed him to the buffet table. Chad showed up wearing a dark brown leather coat one would expect a biker to wear along with sweatpants. Hisuna, Rukia, and Ichigo showed up next. Ichigo was wearing a green jacket with a black sweater and white undershirt. Rukia was wearing dark violet pants, the same kind as Susanna's yellow ones, along with a light brown jacket and darker violet sweater. Hisuna was wearing a rabbit fur coat and maroon pants with matching gloves. Whose bright idea was it to have the party outside? Ichigo asked Kyokaku before he helped himself to the buffet table. Yours or Lelich's? What's the matter, Ichigo? Don't tell me you're going to let a little cold air bother you. Kyokaku said, kicking her legs as she sat on one of the tables. Yeah, come on, Ichigo, it's not Christmas unless you're out in winter air itself. Kyan put a hand on his shoulder. And you got me and my sis here and all your friends. Kyan said, cleverly disguising the fact that they were all family. I already know about our relationship, Kyan, Ichigo said. You don't have to hide it. Oh, so you know, do you? Well then, Kyokaku hopped off the table and headlocked Ichigo before rubbing her knuckles fiercely into his head, obligatory family nuji. She grinned as she abused her cousin. Ichigo protested as she did so. Let me go, would ya? Ichigo struggled to get free. Tatsuki showed up a little later. She had taken a 2-hour nap after her morning exercise and then took a shower before changing to show up. She was wearing a black sweater over a black shirt and was wearing dark blue insulated pants. Ichigo was surprised when it turned out that Lelich and Kyokaku had allowed So-iPhone to extend the invitation to his entire class. It was about 3 p.m. when Renji noticed that Urahara still hadn't shown up yet. Oh, he'll be here, Kyokaku said as she cut herself a slice of her steak. Renji could hear chanting in the background as Yoriyuki was encouraged by several students to down a whole gallon of eggnog without stopping. Surprisingly, So-iPhone wasn't objecting. She allowed Yoriyuki to do what she pleased. After all, this was Yoriyuki-sama, everything she did was gold. On the ice rink, Ichigo and Orium were skating together arm in arm. In the shadows of the artificially made rink, a vengeful Chizuru was concocting a plan to dispose of Ichigo and have Orium all to herself. She was holding a stone that had been used to decorate the party and was waiting for a precise moment. Unfortunately for Chizuru, Lelich had taken a precaution of safety first, so all of the rocks were fake, but had a real feel to them. So when Chizuru chucked the rock at the ice to smash a hole in the ice so that Ichigo would crash backwards and fall through the ice, instead the rock cracked in two and Orium tripped over one of the broken pieces. Ichigo caught her in his arms. She was leaning backwards in his arms. Hey, careful now. You okay, Orium? He asked her. I'm fine, Ichigo-kun. Orium blushed. She was so embarrassed with the way Ichigo was holding her. Nuh. Chizuru lamented, tears streaming down her face, she's falling for him even harder. Ichigo and Orium left the ice rink a little while later, most of their peers followed suit. The open-air stadium lights came on, illuminating the ice rink. Lelich and Susanna were now the only ones on the rink, but neither of them seemed to mind. This was Susanna's first time on ice skates, but Lelich had gotten some practice in before the party and, as a genius with century-long earned physical ability, learning to ice skate was a breeze in comparison to learning Shikai or Bankai, at least mastering the basics was anyway. Lelich was no professional. I'm going to let go now, okay? He smiled at Susanna. Oh, okay. She said. Lelich let go of her hand and began to skate on his own with his hands behind his back. Although Susanna was still saddened by her miscarriage, Rangica had managed to fill her with enough holiday cheer to perhaps allow this to be the day that she could renew her relationship with Lelich. She began to chase him on her ice skates with a smile on her face. It was childlike and genuinely cheery. Lelich took a glance back at her, but only enough that his eye glanced over his shoulder. She couldn't see the smile on his face. She seems to be doing better. Lelich thought to himself. He turned as he approached the edge of the rink and went to pass Susanna by. She turned to follow him, and as she did, after a few strides, she tripped over the other part of the rock that Chizuru threw that broke. She stumbled, but, just as Ichigo had helped Orium, Lelich helped her from falling. Careful there. He told her. Lelich's arm was on Susanna's stomach and she was looking over his right side. You okay? I think I'll be okay. Susanna said. She got to her feet and then noticed that something was dangling over her and Lelich's head. What's that? Attached to a fishing pole, the handle being held by Hirako Shinji, was a mistletoe. Lelich hadn't even noticed the arrival of him and the other vizards, but he could contemplate it later. God damn it, Hirako! He shouted. He skated towards the blonde, but the crafty former captain pulled back on reel and just laughed at Lelich. Lelich Dono, what's wrong? What was that green leaf ornament? Susanna asked. Lelich vigorously rubbed his mouth and clenched his chin with his palm, speaking with slight animosity. It's called a mistletoe. Lelich said. It's tradition for this holiday that any two people caught under a mistletoe should kiss. Lelich stated. Kiss, but there's so many people watching. Susanna said. I know. Lelich said, obviously just as flustered as her. And well, I didn't tell you this, but, Nemu and I got back together and... Lelich was surprised when Susanna grabbed his face with both of her hands and brought her lips to his in such passion. Unable to resist the sensation, Lelich opened his mouth and kissed back. Susanna let go and put her hands loosely upon Lelich's shoulders. I told you before and I'll tell you again. It doesn't matter to me if you will have me or not, but I will always be here for you. I love you and I will never betray you. Susanna put her head on his chest. You can use me, treat me however you like, do whatever you want and I will still be here for you. You were the first person to always look past what I look like and see me for who I am, and for that, I will always be grateful. When did I do that? Lelich was unsure as to Susanna's motives. When I was your student you helped me when I asked for it, treated me like a human being. You treated me with respect when I was your superior. Everyone just avoided me or always saw me as the creepy albino with the red eyes, but you were always different, you know who I am, and for that, I could never bring myself to hate you, ever. Susanna said and wrapped her arms around Lelich's shoulders, hugging him with a calm smile on her face. Lelich put his arms around Susanna. Yeah, I do treat you like that, don't I? Lelich said. Well, hey, look at that, it worked. Shinji said, laughing. What are you doing? Lisa asked, eating a plate of nachos. I got Lelich and the silver-haired chick together. Shinji said. Have a look-see. He pointed to the ice rink where Lelich and Susanna were locked in a soft embrace. Wrong holiday, Cupid. Lisa said, eating another chip. What? Falling in love can happen any time of year. Shinji said. I don't know if Lelich is the type to really have too deep of a connection with anyone. Lisa said. What makes you say that? Shinji asked. You've said so yourself before about how manipulative Lelich is and how he can keep track of so many things at once. Lisa said. When did I ever talk about Lelich? Shinji asked. You used to say a lot of things when you were drunk. Lisa said. And you remember that after so many years? Shinji stated. Not the point. Lisa noted that they were getting off track. Right, continue. Like I was saying, looking at him, I get the feeling that the more he manipulates that sometimes his want to have control of the entire chessboard brings him to any level he needs to in order to have control of the pieces without giving up anything. Lisa stated. You lost me. Shinji said. To put it simply, Lelich can simulate the emotion of love, but he can never really feel a deep connection towards any one person more than anyone else. He cares about a lot of people, but there will never be anyone that's the one for him. Kind of like you and your first love bullshit. Lisa said that last sentence mockingly. Hey. Shinji frowned. Anyway, these chips are kind of dry, I'm going to go get some dip. Lisa walked away. So he can love many, but never love too much. I don't know if that's a gift or a curse. Shinji looked at Lelich. Well, make the most of what you've got, Lelich. It's your life, not mine, damn it, I'm envious. He said that last part quickly. After a few more hours went by, most of Ichigo's friends had gone home to spend the rest of Christmas with their families. It was pitch black out with the floor illuminated under the stadium lights. Everyone was eating when the sound of sleigh bells penetrated through the air. A jolly call rang through the air. Ho ho ho. Merry Christmas. Ichigo looked up at the sky with strained eyes. You've gotta be kidding me. On a sleigh made of wood, robotic reindeer pulling it along, and a jet engine propelling the thing into the sky, a clever invention made by Urahara, the shopkeeper was all dressed up in a Santa suit with all the gifts Lelich and the others had asked him to hold onto in the back of the sleigh. Yururu and Hinta were dressed up in elf costumes. Tessai was up in the announcer booth doing the ho-ho-hoing. Urahara lowered the sleigh to the ground and stepped out of the oversized Santa suit and removed the fake beard and stepped out onto the ground. Pretty impressive, huh? You really are nuttier than a fruitcake. Ichigo sighed. So iPhone simply put her palm over her face and sighed. She had come to expect this kind of thing from Urahara over the years. Can I go to the buffet already? Hinta asked. By all means. Urahara said, opening the fan. Hinta made a mad dash for the food. So, who wants to be the giving gift giver first? No reason to be so organized about it, just organize the boxes according to sender and we can go from there. Lelich stated. Suit yourself. Urahara said. Chizuru, one of Ichigo's classmates that hadn't left the party, was dead set on sabotaging Ichigo and Orium's relationship with a phony present. However, Tessai happened to be standing guard over the gifts as Urahara and Yururu sorted them. Chizuru swallowed seeing the man's massive frame. When he noticed the falsified sending name, he became very angry. You would dare defile the most sacred tradition of Christmas ever. I cannot allow this. He began shredding the box to pieces, revealing what turned out to be very risque lingerie, the kind that would look very perverted on Ichigo's end, to give Orium as a gift. Tessai, not noticing as the item fell casually to the floor, became very cross with Chizuru. The lesbian was smart enough to run away screaming. After Urahara sorted the gifts, Ichigo and Orium began giving the gifts out to their friends, all except the gifts they had picked out for each other. All the gifts were rather thoughtful on Ichigo's end. From the ceramic snow bunny he got Rukia, to the mouth guard he got Tatsuki, since she had been talking about always subconsciously being afraid to get whacked in the jaw while fighting, down to the CD he bought Chad that had been sold out when it was brand new and Ichigo knew his friend didn't have the kind of money to buy it online. The only present Ichigo thought he would screw up was the gift for Lelich. Lelich was the only friend Ichigo hardly knew anything about despite spending so much time with him. Lelich was secretive and never liked to give much away, so Ichigo didn't know what to go for. The only thing he knew Lelich liked, as far as hobbies went, was chess. When he asked the others if they knew anything, it was Kyokaku who tipped him off about the gaming club and Lelich's interests in always learning something new. So, of all things, Ichigo at the pinnacle of his searching managed to find a copy of the board game Tactical Demon. It was basically a more intricate game of chess with dice to represent random number generation. The object of the game was to obliterate your opponent's army. However, depending on the pieces you picked at the beginning depended on how big or powerful your army could be. Interestingly enough, Lelich seemed to be a little more excited about the gift than Ichigo had intended. After reading the back of the box, the demonic smile on Lelich's face gave Ichigo vibes that he didn't want to know what his mentor was thinking. He backed up right into Orium, the only person he had yet to give a gift to, but was holding it right in his hand. Orium was also about to present Ichigo with her gift. Both were nervous, hopeful that the other would really like the gift. They presented their gifts to each other right at the same time. For Orium, Ichigo had gotten her a flower necklace that he figured would go perfectly with the hairpins she wore. It was the same streak of blue and the pendant was in the same pattern. Orium adored it. For Ichigo, Orium had scrambled and gone completely bonkers trying to find the right gift. She now wondered if her gift was as thoughtful and perfect as the one Ichigo got her. She always noticed that Ichigo would always lose track of time, so she got him a watch, and not just any watch. This watch could hold up to 3 different alarms and run 3 different timers. It had cost her quite the fistful of yen, but she felt it was worth it for her boyfriend. It was dark black, comfortable to wear, it was designed with a pair of metal wire over the frame to protect the face from damage, and it could glow in the dark with the push of a button. Ichigo chuckled when he realized what Orium got him. "Hey, I always keep saying how I could use a watch." "Thanks." He strapped the device on immediately. As he programmed the time, a droplet of water splashed onto the face. Ichigo looked up and held his hand up. "It's snowing." "A white Christmas, eh?" Lelouch said, taking note of the weather. "Ichigo, are you coming?" Rukia called to him. "Your sisters and dad are probably wondering what's keeping us. You guys go on ahead, okay?" Ichigo called to his friends. Rukia and Hisuna shrugged and went ahead without him. Ichigo looked back at Orium and blushed as he spoke to her. "Say, Orium, I know you live alone, and so, I was wondering, if you didn't have plans, would you want to come home and have dinner with my family and me?" Orium was shocked. She hadn't actually counted on doing anything other than her usual routine of staying up watching a marathon of television while enjoying herself with pudding and ice cream like she had done the last few years. It was lonely, but it was her escape. Ranjika was going out to party and she didn't know what Susanna was going to do. "Ah, that is I. Why yes," she smiled, "I would love to." "Great." Ichigo smiled. "Come on, let's go catch up to Rukia and Hisuna." Kurosaka Clinic. "So as you can see, I was wondering if Orium could eat with us." Ichigo rubbed his head as he stood in the doorway. Ichigo's family was in shock. Not only was this the first they were hearing Ichigo had a girlfriend, but to find out that said girlfriend was Inu Orium had just set their brains on overload. "Well, I say the more the merrier," Hisuna declared. "It's the season of giving and Orium-san is our guest. We should do the noble thing and treat her with hospitality." "Nei-san's right. Come on in out the cold you two," Rukia said and helped Orium inside and guided her to the kitchen. Ichigo was treated with a slap on the back from his father as he shut the door. This has to be a dream, there's no way Ichigo could have a girlfriend as gorgeous as Inu Orium. Ishine laughed. Ichigo uppercut his dad in the jaw. "If you wanna check that, then hit yourself, not me." "Hey. We have a guest." "Stop fighting," Yuzu exclaimed. Ishine and Ichigo were broken up rather quickly when Ichigo's stomach got to him. He had made sure to save up his appetite for dinner for his family's sake. Dinner was most of the same of what had been at the buffet, but prepared in a homemade style, so it was a little more flavorful. Ichigo congratulated his sister on a job well done. For dessert, Yuzu had actually went out and bought flan and fruit cake, but she baked an apple pie. Sometime after the meal was over, Orium excused herself, not wanting to overstay her welcome decided to leave, but as she opened the door both she and Ichigo noticed that the street had vanished into a world of white and darkness. "Why don't you stay here for the evening?" Ichigo suggested. Orium blushed. "And no, that's okay. I don't live very far from here, so." "Hey, come on now, I can't have you walk out in that. It's freezing," Ichigo said to her. Well, oh okay, but, where am I supposed to sleep?" Orium asked. "My room, of course." Orium's heart skipped a beat. "I think we still have an extra futon or two laid out somewhere." Orium let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. As a courtesy, since there weren't any pajamas that fit her, Rukia went out and got a pair from Orium's Braving the Storm in Soul form, since Soul Reapers were heavily resistant to weather conditions. Ichigo laid out the spare futon for Orium. He had thought of letting her in his bed, but he didn't want to push their relationship that far, not to mention that there wasn't that much room. It would be kind of cramped if the two of them shared his bed. Ichigo had made sure to remove Kon from the picture by handing him off to Yuzo. With the lights turned off, snowstorm raging outside, Orium lay on her back with Ichigo next to her, blushing at the fact that she was staying over, in his room no less. Good night Ichigo-kun," she said. "Good night Orium." The teen turned over and went to sleep. It was a little past midnight when Orium woke up and she was shivering. Despite the heat being on, she just felt a little cold on the floor, futon, and blankets or not. She looked at Ichigo. She imagined how warm his body might possibly be. She figured it would warm her up for certain, but, no, she couldn't impose on him like that, could she? Besides, he was probably fast asleep. She stood up and reached out for his shoulder to see if he was when Ichigo stretched and sat up. He appeared to be rousing from a strange dream. With one hand rubbing his eye and the other open, he saw Orium awake, standing. "Everything all right?" he asked in a whisper. "I'm cold," Orium said bluntly. "The heat's on though, isn't it?" Ichigo said, still half awake. I know, but, could I, sleep with you Ichigo-kun, please?" Orium stuttered. Ichigo smiled warmly to her. "Now I feel kind of silly going through all that trouble with the futon." He had never been against the idea of letting her sleep with him, but he wasn't sure she wanted to. He wanted their relationship to go at her pace. If she wanted to, that was fine by him. He was here for her. "Yeah, sure," he said and scooted over towards the wall a bit. Like a stone, Orium moved closer and closer to Ichigo. She wanted to just jump into his bed next to him, but as her mind realized the large milestone this was for their relationship, it made it very hard for her to move, but eventually she got into bed next to her boyfriend and wrapped her arms around him. "He is, just as warm as I thought." Orium felt herself getting drowsy almost immediately. Ichigo saw this and recovered them both with his quilt. "Good night Orium," he said as he lay back down. "Good night Ichigo-kun," Orium mumbled almost incoherently. The pair laid down and went to sleep. End of chapter 72. Chapter 73, Lelouch reminisces. The next morning. Third-person POV. Ichigo woke up and made to get up, but Orium's sleeping form, snuggled against him so tightly, burnt orange hair sprawled out over his sheets, made him remember just what had happened last night. It would be rude of him, he figured, to wake her. She looked so at peace in her sleep and she was so close to him that Ichigo was afraid even the slightest movement might wake her up. Still, he knew Lelouch always gave him hell for being late. So he balanced the pros and cons and ultimately came to, instead of trying not to wake Orium, and somehow roughly wake her accidentally, he decided to wake her up gently. He kissed her on the forehead. The teen stirred and slowly opened her eyes. She smiled when she saw Ichigo lying next to her. Orium gave him a half-awake smile. "Good morning, love." "Wow," Ichigo whispered. "Ah," Orium sat up quickly. Was that wrong? Should I not have said that?" "I'm sorry, I am MPH." Ichigo kissed her to get her to be quiet. "No, it was fine," he said, holding her around the shoulders from behind. "I just wasn't expecting it was all. Sorry for waking you." He apologized. "It's Sunday and Lelouch is expecting me for training probably, so." "That's okay," Orium said and leaned back and nuzzled her head into Ichigo's neck. "I couldn't have asked for a better way to have been woken up." "Orium." Ichigo held her closer. "Ichigo-kun." Orium moaned his name lowly. "Good morning Ichi." "Boof." The rattling of Ichigo's bedroom doorknob could be heard seconds after there was an impact with the door itself. "What the Ichigo, come over here and open this door right now," his dad shouted. "Well, that killed the mood," Ichigo grumbled. He got up from his bed, strode over to his bedroom door, opened it and kicked his dad promptly in the face, knocking him against the wall. "You know I locked this for a reason. Did you think of that?" What were you doing in there?" Ishine asked. "Do the words, 'my girlfriend's staying over,' not ring any bells?" Ichigo griped. His Hein's overactive mind soon had him running down the stairs to the big poster of Masaki on the wall. Masaki! Our little Ichigo's become a man. God damn it, Dad. Nothing happened. Ichigo ran down the stairs to chase after his father. At the breakfast table, Hisuna was busy cooking pancakes and sausages with help from Yuzu, who was making fried cheese. Such indecency. Hisuna thought as she added some cinnamon to the pancakes. Byakuya-sama would never do something so juvenile if I were no longer alive. The day proceeded pretty normal from there. Other than making a quick stop at Orium's for her to get a change of clothes, Ichigo headed off to train with Lelouch. Orium wanted to go with him, but Ichigo didn't want her standing out in the cold for so many hours. He told her that her health was more important, and that made her feel good that he was looking out for her in such a way. Ichigo gave Lelouch Susanna's regards and the two got down to business. Ichigo had moved past fighting with his physical body and now had moved into using his Shikai. He and Lelouch had worked up a training game. Ichigo couldn't use his Getsuga Tensho and was only allowed to attack when Lelouch put up his kite shields, and only was allowed to strike the kite shields. Lelouch said to imagine the kite shields as his weak points or an opening, and that if Ichigo didn't strike precisely or took too long, Lelouch would retaliate. It would be up to Ichigo then to dodge or parry Lelouch's fireball or Kido. Training this way upped Ichigo's reflexes and his accuracy and forced him to cut down on his hesitation. Since Ichigo was in much better physical shape than Lelouch, it was also helping the squad captain become much more reflexive in his own right. Lelouch needed to improve his own skills, but that would come later. He needed Ichigo to reach captain-level reflex agility and accuracy before he could properly spar with the team. At that point, fighting against Ichigo, Bankai to Bankai would definitely improve his abilities. Since Lelouch had Gentei Kaijo on him, Ichigo would no doubt be stronger if they clashed Bankai against Bankai, so fighting against a stronger opponent would no doubt improve his own abilities. Meanwhile, on this same day, in the Soul Society, Orium hadn't been the only one who needed companionship during the cold night. The Soul Society's heat systems had malfunctioned late last night, before midnight. No one had any idea why, though many speculated the research department blew a fuse of some sort. Because of this, Momo, her own quarters so cold and lonely, had sought the comfort and warmth of her captain's cabin right next door. Hitsugaya was happy to have her stay with him. The cold never bothered him, being an ice Zanpakuto user, so for someone like Momo, a fire user, she might be a little more susceptible to cold weather. Hitsugaya fixed her up some hot cocoa, trying to be a good host. The automatic heat system wasn't working, but thankfully there was still electricity and there were a few electric blankets in the closet. Neither had a problem with it. They had shared beds before when they were much younger. Of course back then Momo had issues, but of course what Hitsugaya didn't know was that Momo wasn't actually leaking, but rather her body sort of moved on its own at night. So what he mistook for urine was actually, well, you get the idea. The heating issue still hadn't been fixed. The head captain advised that, due to the weather, that all officers were encouraged to wear the insulated versions of their uniforms or, if they could help it, not wander outside at all. So that left Hitsugaya and Momo to do all of their paperwork in the captain's office, constantly staying warm by fixing up bowls of hot soup and ramen and warm cocoa. Hitsugaya never minded the cold, even as a kid. It was the heat that bothered him more than anything else. In 30 years of knowing him, many, including Lelouch, never quite understood how the child-sized Soul Reaper could wander out into the cold in short sleeves, but then swelter if the temperatures rose anywhere above 70 degrees even with no Shitaji on. So, for the day both childhood friends sat around playing games, eating and doing work. It was quality time they hardly got to share for so long, since Hitsugaya was always out and about doing captainly things, so Momo really only ever saw him when she visited him in his office or saw him after hours, and usually he was too busy to have such casual conversations as they were having now. They laughed and talked about happy times. Remember the time Matsumoto got so drunk she thought a pair of watermelons on the buffet table was another bustier woman mocking her? Hitsugaya asked, chuckling. Momo laughed. Wait, remember when the Department of Research and Development had a research failure and Lamperouge Teiko went in and tried to settle the dispute? Yeah, and then he came out and was all, right, I've decided it would be better if Anohana Teiko handled this situation. Hitsugaya laughed. That was funny. Oh, and remember when Hisagi-san went out to the markets and got hit on by that male prostitute? Momo asked. Now that was comedy gold. Hitsugaya was trying hard not to laugh so hard he couldn't breathe. Remember the time Aizen? Hitsugaya stopped when he realized the name he brought up. Just the mention of Aizen's name sent Momo into a flying rage or emotional breakdown, but for some reason Momo didn't show the slightest flicker of emotion. Her serene demeanor was somewhat scary. Go ahead Shiro-chan, what were you going to say? Momo asked. Nothing, forget I said anything. Hitsugaya said and walked over to the window. The pathways of the 5th Division grounds were frozen with ice. You don't have to make that name taboo Shiro-chan. Momo said, getting to her feet. I'm over it now, really. You say that, but I doubt that's really true. You looked up to Aizen before we all found out what he really was. We doubted Lelich's warning to us and look where it got us. Even then in the end you still tried to have Aizen remembered as two separate people. You wanted the good deeds he actually did do for the Soul Society not to be forgotten. That was admirable of you. Aizen tried to use me? Momo said. Hitsugaya turned around, shocked to hear those words come out of Momo's mouth. I found some data disks that I managed to get back from the Central 46 a few weeks ago that were confiscated after his death. I never meant anything to him. It hurt me so badly. I looked up to him, and that was how he treated me. Momo seemed like she might cry, but she sniffed and retracted it. And so, I don't want to lose to the weakness of emotion ever again. I've been reviewing the things that I was taught when I was a phantom and so now I feel a lot better. Aizen weakened me and I won't ever let it happen again. I won't lose to my weakness. I will become strong of heart like you and Lamperouge Teiko. Hitsugaya smiled at her. I'm glad Momo, that's great to hear. Suddenly a timer went off. That's the cookies. Momo said and ran for the oven. She pulled out a spreadsheet of cookies shaped like sunflowers. They were cinnamon with a lemon cream center. Well, that's better than the last batch at least. Hitsugaya thought to himself, recalling a mishap with a batch of cookies shaped like glasses back in September. He only found out about it after the fact though. 3 months ago. Soul Reapers Women Association meeting. I baked cookies. Momo announced, entering the fall solstice party of the SRWA meeting. On a spreadsheet was a bunch of peanut butter cookies shaped like square-rimmed glasses. Aizen picked one up and looked at it. These look like AIMMPH. Shush. Naneo told her in an aggravated whisper. Don't you remember what Lamperouge Teiko said he would do to us if we said that name around her? Hitsugaya had made a similar threat, but of course, not yet being a captain, no one took him as seriously. He was set up to become on though. His promotion would be alongside Hisona's at the end of the month. Yachiru, little innocent little psychopath that she was, grabbed a pair of glasses and stood up on a chair. She looked through the confectionery treats eye holes and then tore them away from her face. I will stand at the top. She shouted and cracked the cookie in half with her fist. Momo unfortunately saw this and fell over in shock. Hinamari-kun. Present day. Yeah, Hitsugaya thought to himself, twitching, remembering how Yachiru had gotten off the hook without so much as a slap on the wrist because no one dared mess with her because that meant messing with Zaraki himself. Let's not go through something like that again. New Year's Eve. Before arriving at Orium's that Friday evening for a small get-together, Lelich stopped by the Urahara shop to give Urahara a birthday present. On Christmas, the 10th Division captain had gotten the Twisted Shopkeeper a store-brand taffy cutter. The device was used to perfectly cut taffy and the blades never dulled. For his birthday, Lelich went an extra 9 yards and got Urahara a very old comic book from a series that the shopkeeper had been following for years, according to Shinji. It was a special limited edition #2.5 issue completely out of print. Urahara's jaw dropped when the comic reached his hand. He had to know how Lelich got this. He had spent years online trying to find the 36-page book, but never was able to track it down. You're not supposed to ask the giver of the gift their source. Lelich said with a smile. Well, I must admit I'm very happy with this. Thanks Lelich, I'm glad I have a friend like you. Urahara smiled. It was moments like that that made Lelich realize how far he had come since the days of the Black Knights. Still, the call of vigilantism rang deep within his soul, and while Lelich would sometimes answer it, he would almost immediately hang up. However, he somehow had a feeling that playing on the dark side would someday be required of him. As Lelich paraded about in Orium's apartment along with Ichigo, Tatsuki, Susanna, Rangiku, Renji, Kyan, Rukia, and Hisuna, he sat down in the beanbag chair in front of the television with a bowl of popcorn. Susanna was sitting right next to him, the two were sharing. Ichigo and Orium were on the couch on one side, Rangiku was on the other next to the table set up beside her where the sparkling champagne sat. Renji sat on the floor to Lelich and Susanna's left with a bucket of potato chips, and Rukia sat in Kyan's lap in the chair off to his right. Tatsuki was sitting to Ichigo's right in one of those special chairs that could lean back and were shaped like the letter J. Hisuna was in the kitchen, as usual, baking a special cake for the new year. "Hisuna, come on and sit down, you're always hanging in the kitchen lately. You never sit down." Kyan called to her. "Hey. Just because we're going to be family doesn't mean you can order me around," Hisuna declared. "That would be less convincing if you weren't wearing a cooking apron," Kyan said. "You are really lucky I'm in Jigai right now," Hisuna sneered through gritted teeth. "Kyan Dono's right though, Nasan, come sit down and watch the movie. You have to wait 20 minutes to continue working on the cake anyway, right?" Rukia called to her. Hisuna sighed. "Oh, all right." She walked over to the couch and leaned over it in between where Orium and Rangiku were sitting. Orium had gone into town with Rangiku the day before to get movies for tonight. They got a slew of romantic comedies and a couple of horror films for when it really got dark, and had been playing the films since early this morning. The movie that was currently on was an old black and white Brighton neon film about a man that created a potion that turned him into a monster whenever he drank it, but by the end of the movie he didn't even need the potion to transform. "And the moral of that story is, kids, don't do drugs," Renji said, shoving a mouthful of chips into his mouth only to choke on one and hack back out into a napkin. "And the moral of that action is, everyone, never eat more than you can chew." Everyone began laughing at Renji's expense. Renji growled, he still hadn't forgiven Kyan for that card game incident. Hisuna's cake came out exceptionally well. It was chocolate with a vanilla ice cream inside, with chunks of soft dough cookies inside the ice cream, with a layer of buttercream icing over the chocolate cake itself. "Once again, Hisuna, you've outdone yourself," Ichigo said, enjoying the cake. Soon the crucial hour was drawing near. It drew closer and closer, and when it finally arrived, everyone cheered and confetti burst everywhere. The partying continued after that for about another hour and a half, and then everyone started to head off towards their respective resting places. Ichigo told Rukia and Hisuna to go home without him. He was going to do the nice thing and help Orium clean up like Tatsuki was. "Ichigo's right, Nasan, I'm going to do that too," Rukia decided. And soon, because of Ichigo's kind heart, everyone was dragged into helping clean up, except for Rangiku, who had had so much to drink that she was passed out on the couch and snoring like a fiend. Lelich told Ichigo he could show up in the afternoon tomorrow and they would go on a school day schedule in order for Ichigo to get some sleep. It wasn't worth training if Ichigo wasn't going to be at 100%, and Lelich was unwilling to put up with his attitude, not to mention that all the partying was starting to get to him as well. As the squad captain trudged off back to the warehouse, he phoned Yoriyuki to wish her a happy birthday and told her he'd bring her present to her tomorrow. Lelich refused to spoil the surprise over the phone, but he had gotten Yoriyuki a subscription to a magazine he saw her reading one time that she said she had just bought the issues she liked when she could, because buying a subscription was just so expensive, and since iPhone didn't have enough, having spent quite the chunk of change on Yoriyuki's Christmas present, Lelich was going to help his friend out and get her idol the subscription. A few days after the holidays, January 6th to be precise, Ichigo and all of his friends that would be fighting in the war were gathered into Urahara's shop for an important announcement. From this day forward, until the day of the war, whenever it would be, Karakura town would be replaced with a replica, and all of its inhabitants would be put into a deep slumber and kept under surveillance by the Soul Society. Lelich had managed to persuade the Central 46 to provide the town with no less than 3 members of the Royal Guard. Lelich was absolutely certain that would be enough, given all of the other lesser officers that would already be patrolling the area. Morale was a powerful thing, and having such strong, capable units on the field would give the weaker officers the strength and motivation they needed to fight. Lelich made several more deals with the Central 46, but for the sake of psyching Talbumasuk out he needed to keep his mouth shut to everyone. He was pleased when Yamamoto bought his "to deceive your enemies you must first deceive your friends" speech, and other than the head captain and Urahara no one else knew about Lelich's ultimate trump card or his two other, lesser trump cards. Rukia's wedding was scheduled to take place in a few days, January 12th, 2 days before her birthday. Ichigo asked Lelich if they could put as much time as they could into training in between now, the wedding and the war. Lelich agreed. For the entirety of January 7th, all Ichigo and Lelich did was train. They did so outside the Siriti in a location far away from civilization. Lelich was just a Tentiakura or Hell Butterfly away if something came up. In the time they had been training together, Ichigo and Lelich were finally now competing on Bankai level, and Lelich had spent the last 3 days training at 20%. Now at full strength, his body adapted to the difference and he pushed Ichigo, and he pushed him hard. With his mask, Ichigo would turn the tide against Lelich and box the captain into a corner, forcing Lelich to double his effort and increase his own ability, making him stronger. At the end of the day, when both captain-level Soul Reapers were utterly exhausted, they each bought a glass of cider and sat underneath a tree to catch their breath and relax. "Say Ichigo," Lelich said, making conversation, "have you ever thought of what you might do when you grow up?" "Not really," Ichigo said. "Isn't it a little early to be thinking about stuff like that? After all, there's still this war I gotta get through, don't I?" Lelich laughed. "Living in the present is fine, but sometimes it's best to strive towards the future, especially for those of us who no longer have one to look forward to," Lelich said. His mind began to think happy thoughts of what he might have done had he never become Zero, fantasies of fond times with his siblings, the priceless look on his father's face when Lelich stood united with his siblings to take the old man out, and eventually his mind drifted back to another fond memory. Pendragon, March 2008 ATB. Cornelia was in the Ares Palace as per her job as head of Marianne's guard. She had had the position for a few months now, ever since her mother passed away shortly after Cornelia's 18th birthday. Cornelia had caught wind of her mother's sickness during the war against the EU in New Zealand and was shipped home to take care of her sick mother. Cornelia was promoted from major to colonel for her actions in the war, and Marianne had asked her to take charge of her personal guard at the funeral. Cornelia didn't have to be at the palace every day since she was in charge of the guard, but she visited frequently because she enjoyed seeing Lelich, Nunnally and, most of all, Marianne. She was greeted at the door by a kindergarten-aged Nunnally, though not so enthusiastically greeted by Lelich. "Something the matter, Lelich?" Cornelia asked. "Big brother's mad cause mommy confiscated his chess set cause he wouldn't do his homework," Nunnally said. "Nunnally, you don't have to tattle on me," Lelich whined. Cornelia put Nunnally down. "What's this about not doing homework? You're such a bright young kid, Lelich. That's not like you. I always ace my tests, so doing homework is pointless. So if I were to ask you anything out of your study material, you would be able to answer it," Cornelia challenged. "I'll take that bet," Lelich said with a defiant glare. He and Cornelia met in the study. She picked up his science book and opened it to a random page. "Name 6 elements from the periodic table in order of atomic weight." "Hydrogen, helium, carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, and argon," Lelich answered. Cornelia picked up his English book. "Spell a word that means to throw something out a window." "Defenestration, defenestration." "Sum up the main ideas in." The author of Alice in Wonderland hates math, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde shows us the inherent evil of man, and Frankenstein teaches us that we shouldn't mess with things beyond our full control," Lelich said before he could finish, knowing what he was supposed to read. He was on high school level learning and he was feeling rather unchallenged. Lelich wasn't even in double digits in terms of age. No matter what Cornelia threw at Lelich, he answered promptly and coherently. "I give up." She leaned back in her chair. "See, homework is pointless, I'm a genius," Lelich said with a defiant glare. Cornelia reached out and pat his head. "Yup, that's what father and even my mother always say, you're the genius of the family." You're messing up my hair. Lelich whined. Cornelia let go and Lelich fixed his hair to remain as flat as ever. Cornelia pressed her knuckles into her cheek. You know, Lelich, when you get older you should join the military. Together you and I would be an unstoppable team. We'll align our families and together we'll outlive our father and create a kinder, gentler Britannia, free of prejudice. Cornelia gave Lelich her pinky. Me? In the military? Lelich asked. Well, you'd have to build up your stamina, but I think you'd do just fine with some training. You've got more brains than some of our privates. Cornelia said. Was that a double entendre? Lelich asked. Marianne happened to be passing by and heard her son. Lelich. Mouth. High school level learning was one thing, but she didn't need Lelich learning about lewd things at his age. But Mom, you say it all the time as well as. Don't make me get the soap, young man. She scolded. Lelich folded his arms and began murmuring into his chest. You too, Cornelia, I know the kind of language that gets thrown around the military. Behave yourself around my children, okay? Marianne wagged her finger. Cornelia dropped to one knee. Fist in the ground. Oh, of course, Lady Marianne, I would never dream of defiling or poisoning the minds of your darling children and my beloved half-siblings. As long as you know. Marianne smiled and walked away. Ha, you got in trouble. Lelich pointed and laughed. Cornelia, at least, was mature enough not to let such juvenile acts get the better of her. She sat back in the chair. So about my projected promise, Lelich. She revisited their previous conversation. Lelich gave Cornelia his pinky. As long as you promise. He said. I promise. Cornelia smiled and the two linked fingers. Present day. Ouch. Lelich. Hello. Ichigo waved a hand in front of Lelich. Huh? What? Lelich didn't realize he had just spaced out. You know it's kind of creepy when you just zone out in the middle of a conversation like that. Ichigo said, scratching the side of his head in front of his ear along his sideburns. I lost focus. Lelich realized. Don't panic, Lelich, rewind. Lelich attempted to recall what they had been talking about before. That's right, we were talking about the future. Sorry, I was thinking about something. You should give more careful consideration to your future, you know. And it's even creepier when you suddenly resume a conversation like that. Ichigo shook his displeasure off. Well, you've never steered me wrong before. If you say I should give my future more consideration, then I'll do it. Good, glad to hear it. Lelich smiled. 3 days later. Talbumasuk called full assembly of his Arrancar army. In the time between Gantenbin's destruction and now he had recalibrated and redefined the Segunda Etapa formula and, with the loss of several failed expendable numerous, he managed to perfect the formula. Now all of the Espada had a second release. And all of them had had ample time to test it out in the field within Hueco Mundo by beating up on random hollows and using each other to spar, which were carefully observed by Talbumasuk to make sure that his allies didn't wind up offing each other. Thankfully Hannibal, Sparga, and Starkey, his three strongest, always managed to keep the lower ranks from decimating each other with their Ryotsu alone. Talbumasuk was confident in his army's build-up and now, with the assembly called, was prepared to make a formal announcement of the big attack they had all been waiting for. My dear Espada, and those that follow them, I have assembled you all today to announce that in 5 days, Talbumasuk held out his entire palm, we shall invade Karakura town and smite all those that resist us. We will follow our former master's plan to create the Oken and then invade the Soul Society and invade the Royal Dimension, and you will all help me crush the Spirit King under the weight of our power. With the added boost I have given to you, there will be not a soul that can stand in our way. Arrancar, by their very nature, are stronger than Soul Reapers. With my Bankai and your Segunda Etapa, even the head captain himself will fall to our power, even the greatest X-Factor the Soul Society has, Kurosaki Ichigo, stands no chance against us. We will stand united and we shall triumph. Talbumasuk smirked. Even the Royal Guard the Godii places its faith in will have no chance at defeating us. He took a deep breath. But enough boasting and speech-giving, we shall reassemble again the day before the attack to discuss strategy for the attack. Until then, go about your business and try to relax. Many of you have been having a lot of pent-up energy in anticipation for this battle, and so try to make the most of things and just relax. There was a silence as Talbumasuk waited for any of his espada or their fraction to say anything, but no one did. You are all dismissed. I will see you in a few days. The espada shuffled out. Talbumasuk, feeling like he could use some rest, returned to his quarters, only to find Mia waiting for him. She walked right up to Talbumasuk and straddled his body from his chest up to his face, where she ran her luscious lips over her master's. Talbumasuk ran a hand up Mia's back and up through her dark lavender hair and kissed her lips and down her neck, turning the septima on. This is how you choose to relax? He asked with a smirk as he licked right under her chin, a known turn-on spot. Don't act like you don't want me. Mia purred. What gave you the idea that I was? Talbumasuk responded as he ran his hand over Mia's clothed bosom. Mia moaned erotically in pleasure, enjoying her master's touch. Only in his presence did she let herself become the hunted. He was a master and she felt so incredible whenever she offered herself to him. Talbumasuk and Mia locked lips again and tumbled over to the bed. Talbumasuk removed all of Mia's clothing as she lay directly underneath him. He took her, dominating her, nothing on but her shoes. The rush was incredible. It was always incredible. However, as the sensation died down, Mia decided that instead of gathering herself and leaving, she wanted to stay with her master and lie down with him. Mia didn't understand it at the time, but whenever she was around her master it was if nothing else in the world mattered. It wasn't like when she stalked her prey and dominated it, but the organ of which she had given up in order to become a hollow felt like it existed so long as she was with her master. Mia didn't understand it, but if any human, or soul reaper would have known what was happening to her. Mia was falling in love with Talbumasuk Tremere. End of Chapter 73. Chapter 74, From Sayuri to Sheba, Rukia's Wedding. Third-person POV. Today was the day of Rukia and Kayan's wedding. Preparations had been made by both the Kukaki and the Sheba families. Although Rukia would be switching houses, Hisuna would be damned if she wasn't going to be involved in planning Rukia's special day. It was agreed, though, that the Sheba clan grounds would be used for the event. Lelich had also done some work planning out the wedding. He had been to so many of them he figured he could help plan one in his sleep. With him on the planning team, the wedding was altered to be a little more modern than the nobles were used to, but both Kayan and Byakuya made it clear that if Lelich thought it was a good idea, that the nobles should suck it up and go along with it. Incidentally enough, Lelich had also been asked by Kayan to be his best man. Kayan was the only person he could trust with such an important task. Anyone he could ask that was reliable was either involved in the wedding or completely unreliable. Lelich, of course, happily accepted. Contrary to popular belief, Rukia didn't pick Hisuna to be her maiden of honor. Instead, she picked the only woman in all of Seoul society she could really call a friend, Libra Naomi. Naomi and Rukia had been friends ever since their days in the Phantoms, and the fifth seat had always been in Rukia's corner, and Rukia remembered how helpful she had been on that day back in June during the incident with Grand Fisher. If it hadn't been for Naomi, Rukia wouldn't have been ready for when Hisuna and Kayan showed up later. She hadn't done any fighting, but Rukia knew that, when it really came down to it, Naomi could be trusted. True, Naomi was ditzy, over-energetic, and acted like an elementary school child whenever she got pouty, but Rukia knew Naomi could be more than that when she needed to be. She saw that side of Naomi 6 months ago. No, instead Rukia had special idea in mind for Hisuna, but wanted to make the announcement when the time was right. Currently Hisuna was in the bride's room with Rukia, staring at her sister in her snow-white wedding gown, white flower head dress in her hair, and silver eyeshadow worn on her eyes. Hisuna was wearing a crimson-colored dress with a cloth veil over the blouse. She was wearing ankle-high leather boots and matching gloves with a maroon blouse. Hisuna was reminded of a song as she looked at her sister. One part woman, the other part girl, perfume and makeup, ribbons and curls. "Nae-san, are you okay? You've been staring at me for a while. Are you thinking about something?" Rukia asked her. "I'm not sure. I just feel like I'm losing my baby sister. She'll change her name today. She'll make a promise and I'll give her away. Once I walk you down that aisle, you'll be just my sister, not my baby sister anymore." Hisuna wiped her eyes. She couldn't stop her tears. Ever since you returned to my life, I've always tried to treat you like you were so fragile, but, that's all over now. You're growing up. Rukia stood up and walked over to Hisuna and hugged her. Don't cry, Nae-san. Please don't cry. It'll be okay. I'll always be your baby sister. A thought crossed Rukia's mind. She grabbed Hisuna's sleeve and suckled on it. She pursed her eyes to look as childish and cute as possible. She let go of Hisuna's sleeve and talked in a really cute tone as his sister looked at her. Bayama. Hisuna continued to sob and she pulled Rukia as tight to her as she could. With all that I've done wrong, I must have done something right to deserve the life I lead and the relationship we have. Oh Rukia. Nae-san. The door to Rukia's room opened. Byakuya stood in the doorway. It's time, Hisuna. Hisuna nodded. She made to let go, but Rukia held on to her. I decided, I know this is rather untraditional, but, I want Nae-san to walk me down the aisle. Rukia said. That is rather untraditional, but, I can understand why you would request that. Is that a problem for you, Hisuna? Byakuya was worried Hisuna may not want to let go. Hisuna shook her head. Just promise me you'll be there for me when I fall apart. Hisuna said to Byakuya. Of course I will, you can count on me. Byakuya said to her. He left and Hisuna walked arm in arm with Rukia, leading her to where Kayan and Ichigo were standing on the altar. Hisuna held herself together as best she could, and when the time came for Hisuna and Rukia to separate, the elder Sayuri sibling did so without hesitation. She watched Rukia go up to stand in front of Kayan. Hisuna sat down in the front pew next to Byakuya. She leaned into his shoulder and sobbed. Byakuya wrapped his arms around her and soothed her. This was a big step for Hisuna, a step she had to make, and she was doing her very best to accept it. Hisuna knew she would calm down eventually, but she knew she probably wouldn't stop shedding tears until the reception. You look lovely, Rukia. Kayan said to her, Lelouch standing behind him. The servant presiding over the ceremony proceeded to give the usual speech. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the Soul Society to join this man and woman in matrimony, which is considered admirable among all men. As such, it should not be entered unadvised or lightly, but reverently, discreetly, advisedly, and solemnly, truly, madly, deeply. If there is anyone here who can give a reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace. Objection. From the fifth row all the way to the far left, Renji rose to his feet and stomped his foot on the ground. Hisuna's sorrow suddenly turned to irate anger, as she never felt more desire in her life than to have Kaze no Iriko in her hand in order to outright strangle someone. Byakuya pat her reassuringly on the shoulder. I'll take care of it, he told her. Renji, what the hell do you think you're doing? Rukia shouted. I know you saw this crap in one of the movies we were watching on New Year's Eve, but don't you dare think that gives you the right to ruin my wedding day. But Renji started to explain himself. Renji, Kayan sighed, I've embarrassed you time and hell again in private, don't make me do it here and now in front of all these people. Hey, shut up, Kayan. Renji flipped him off. The words were, speak now if you have a reason to object, and I have a few words I want to say. Kayan put his hand over his face, marveling in Renji's stupidity. Lelouch did the same. You're not actually supposed to do anything, Kayan thought. It takes a completely new level of stupid to do this. Lelouch thought to himself. So like I was saying, HWAH. A fierce karate chop knocked into the back of Renji's neck, stunning him. Ack. He slumped over and Ichigo and Kyokaku grabbed each of his arms. No reason to worry, folks, Kyokaku said. We're professionals, Ichigo added jokingly. Just go on with the ceremony. The two cousins dragged Renji out into the hall. After the disturbance, and a few unceremonious coughs, the wedding continued. So now let us continue, the hired servant said. Do you, Sayuri Rukia, since Rukia was marrying out of the Kuchikis, it had been discussed that it was only proper that her original surname be used, take Shiba Kayan to be your lawfully wedded husband. I do, Rukia said without hesitation. Will you love, comfort, honor and protect him, and forsaking all others, be faithful to him so long as your time together exists? Rukia was asked. I will. She nodded. The servant turned to Kyan. And do you Shiba Kyan take Sayuri Rukia to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Kyan said without missing a beat. Will you love, comfort, honor and protect her, and forsaking all others, be faithful to her so long as your time together exists? I will. Kyan affirmed. Well then, does your best man have a ring? Lelich promptly pulled out the box containing the wedding rings Kyan had given him for his and Rukia's wedding. The vows were next as Kyan and Rukia exchanged rings. By this time Ichigo, Kyokaku, and Renji had returned to the hall with Kyokaku sneering at Renji and keeping him on a short leash. Pull another stunt like that again, she threatened in a whisper through gritted teeth, and so help me, I don't care if I'm reincarnated as a flea, I will yank out your brain stem, shove it down your windpipe, turn your ass inside out, stick your foot down your throat so that you choke on it, tie your wrist to your ankle with baling twine and super glue your penis to your navel and put your other leg in a brace so that you'll have to walk around hopping and be forced to shit sideways. Do you understand me? Yes ma'am. Renji cowered, swallowing. The vows began once the trio returned to their seats. Kai and Dano, Rukia started first. Ever since the day I first met you, I liked you. You were the first person, after my transferal into the Godai itself, to treat me as a human being instead of how all the others looked at me. To you I wasn't the sister of the wife of the head of the Kukaki clan, I was just Kukaki Rukia, another ready recruit of Squad 13. Perhaps it was because you yourself were a noble and understood my position, but you always went out of your way to be nice to me. I admit that I was envious of Miyako, but I never wished upon her the fate that befell her. I know how much you loved her and I am glad that, now that you are moving on, that I am who you are moving on to. I will always be here for you no matter what. No matter how far you fear or feel you've fallen, I'll be right beside you to pick you back up. Always remember that. Rukia then gave Kyan the ring. Kyan cleared his throat. It's just as was said before, Kyan began, I will love and comfort, honor and protect you, forsake all others and be faithful to you so long as our time together exists. You're one of the few things I have in this world that makes this life still worth living. Nothing more needs to be said other than that, my actions of our time together will speak for me to show how much I care. Hisuna smiled through the tears that were reforming again. Kyan's so sweet. Rukia couldn't have picked a better husband. Hisuna then slumped to the side and then put her head on Byakuya's shoulder. Just as I know I couldn't have either. And now a moment of silence. No one said a word, everyone was dead quiet. Interestingly enough, none of them were thinking about the two people about to be joined together for who knew how long. Orium was hoping she'd catch the bouquet, Kyokaku was thinking of how many ways she could abuse the 6th squad lieutenant without legally getting into trouble, the head captain was wondering if there would be herbal tea served at the reception, and the list continued on and on and on. Then so by the power invested in me, I now pronounce these two as husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Kyan kissed Rukia passionately and the sight would have made Renji hit the floor, but Kyokaku grabbed him by the neck hairs. Watch, and, accept. She enunciated. Renji let out a deep sigh and did exactly that. Shortly after that the room cleared out and everyone went outside for the reception. Compared to the ceremony, nothing truly rambunctious occurred. Unless the violent 8-way battle over the bouquet between Rangiku, Susanna, Nimue, Naomi, Isane, Shisato, Vera, and, surprisingly, Kyokaku counted. In the end, much to the surprise of only those that suspected that Kyokaku would scare everyone away from the arrangement of flowers, Orium came out with the bouquet after the catfight sent the arrangement of flowers outside their combat zone and the teen just casually picked it up. The fighting didn't stop though, and Orium was safely out of sight when they noticed the bouquet's disappearance. As was traditional custom, Lelich and Naomi danced with each other, but Lelich was such a popular guy that he was constantly switching partners. He repeated partners, but he never had the same girl twice in a row. It was a downright pain in the ass for the squad captain, who only had so much stamina to begin with. Thankfully the dancing was over before Lelich toppled over onto the side of one of the tables. However, this was in favor of the karaoke battle. The winner would receive a lovely vacation to a beach of the winner's choosing in the world of the living. Of all people to kick things off, The first contestant was vice captain of squad 2, Otamaka Kendra. Check it out, going out on a late night. Looking tight, feeling nice, it's a cockfight. I can tell, I just know that it's going down tonight. At the door we don't wait cause we know them. At the bar 6 shots just beginning. That's when Dickhead put his hands on me, but you see, I'm not here for your entertainment. You don't really want to mess with me tonight. Just stop and take a second. I was fine before you walked into my life. Cause your love is over before it begins. Keep your dreams, just give me the money. It's just you and your hand tonight. No one had any idea the vice captain of squad 2 could sing the way she could. It was damn good. Second contestant, vice captain of squad 3, Kira Izuru. No one knows what it's like to be the bad man. To be the sad man. Behind blue eyes. And no one knows what it's like to be hated. To be fated to telling only lies. But my dreams, they aren't empty. As my conscience seems to be. I have hours, only lonely. My love is vengeance. That's never free. I hear screaming. Iin Tamashi said to Lelich. I don't hear anything. Really, it sounds like the shrilled cries of 1,000 young ladies going gaga over your friend's voice and choice of song. You're delusional. Contestant number 3, Shihoin Yoriyuki. You're so hot teasing me, so you're blue, but I can't take a chance on a kid like you. It's something I couldn't do. There's that look in your eyes, I can read in your face that your feelings are driving you wild. Oh, but boy, you're only a child. Well, I can dance with you, honey, if you think it's funny. Does your mother know that you're out? And I can chat with you, baby, flirt a little maybe. Does your mother know that you're out? Take it easy, better slow down, boy. That's no way to go. Does your mother know? Take it easy, try to cool it, boy, play it nice and slow. Does your mother know? Byakuya rolled his eyes, knowing the hypocrisy of what Yoriyuki was singing. So iPhone just marveled and cooed at listening to Yoriyuki sing. Yoriyuki-sama. Momo was the next one up. Summer has come and passed, the innocent can never last. Wake me up when September ends. Like my father's come to past, 7 years have gone so fast. Wake me up when September ends. Here comes the rain again, falling from the stars. Drenched in my pain again, becoming who we are. As my memory rests, but never forgets what I lost. Wake me up when September ends. Her voice was pure and angelic, everyone loved it. Sure, it was no knock your socks of wow like Kendra's performance had been, but it didn't have to be. Contestant number 5, Hisagi Shihei, vice captain of squad 9. All I ever wanted was destiny to be fulfilled. It is in my hands, I must not fail and I must not fall. Even through the darkest days, this fire burns always. This fire burns always. This is the perfect world, destiny is so loud. Thrown away from yesterday. Tomorrow's in my hands, oh. Never more to be held down. By the waves against me. Never more to be cast aside. This day is mine. You know, again, I'm hearing that same screaming. Iin Tamashi noted. Would you shut up? I'm trying to listen. Lelich chastised. Contestant number 6 was, of all people, Kurosaki Ichigo. Before starting, he prefaced the song by saying, "This goes out to my girlfriend." He smiled at Orium. And I'd give up forever to touch you, cause I know that you feel me somehow. You're the closest to heaven that I'll ever be, and I don't want to go home right now. And all I can taste is this moment, and all I can breathe is your life. But sooner or later it's over. I just don't want to miss you tonight. And I don't want the world to see me, cause I don't think that they'd understand. When everything's made to be broken, I just want you to know who I am. Orium loved the song and loved it every so much more that Ichigo was dedicating it to her. Keshiba Ryu, 4th seed of Squad 11, got up on the stage, though his choice of song was rather jazzy. It starts very early once the baby toys are gone. A kid on the playground has to choose what side he's on. It's the bullies or the good guys, boy, there ain't no middle ground. The hoodlums try to blur the line and twist the truth around. Then they call themselves a winner, but they're self-deceiving fools. Cause the game ain't worth winning if you're breaking all the rules. The law was laid upon when as kids we first asked why. Our parents set the rules because I said so, they reply. And though I thought I hated them and screamed with all my might, the next time that I had a choice, gee whiz I did what's right. No, I never snuck a drink. I never stole a pack of cools. 'Cause the game ain't worth winning if you're breaking all the rules. Don't break the rules. Or else we're living in the wild wild west. Don't break the rules. God's keeping score, you don't wanna fail that test. Don't break the rules. You thumb your nose right at the life for which I strive, but those rules, those laws keep us alive. It was about an average performance. Not bad, but not all that great either compared to some other singers. Up next was the vice captain of Squad 10, Matsumoto Rangiku. I feel like I've been locked up tight for a century of lonely nights, waiting for someone to release me. You're licking your lips and blowing kisses my way, but that don't mean I'm gonna give it away, baby baby baby. Ah, my body's saying let's go. Ah, but my heart is saying no, no. If you wanna be with me baby, there's a price to pay. I'm a genie in a bottle, you gotta rub me the right way. If you wanna be with me I can make your wish come true. Just come and set me free baby and I'll be with you. I'm a genie in a bottle baby. Gotta rub me the right way honey. I'm a genie in a bottle baby. Come on and let me out. Contestant number 9 was Renji in an attempt to redeem himself. The lyrics started off without music, followed by the melody. Shot through the heart and you're to blame, darling you give love a bad name. An angel's smile is what you sell, you promised me heaven and put me through hell. Chains of love, got a load on me, when passion's a prison you can't break free. Hoo-oh-ay-ay-ay your loaded gun. Yeah. There's nowhere to run. No one can save me, the damage is done. Shot through the heart. And you're to blame, darling you give love a bad name. I play my part and you play your game, you give love a bad name. And you give love a bad name. I'm hearing the screaming again. Iin Tamashi quipped. Shut up. The next contestant, number 10, was Captain Yukatake of Squad 13. Oh, the power to be strong, and the wisdom to be wise. All these things will come to you in time. On this journey that you're making, there'll be answers that you seek. Yeah, it's you who climb the mountain. It's you who reach the peak. Son of man, look to the sky. Lift your spirit, set it free. Someday you are torn with pride. Son of man, a man in time you'll be. Kian cheered like a little schoolgirl at hearing her captain sing. She loved his voice. Still hearing the screaming. Enough. Naomi was up next. She was the last girl to perform for the evening. You are all I can remember, after all that we've been through. Forever in my heart. Now I'm through and June feels like November, still can't believe it's true. Too long we've been apart. One more night, I wanna be with you, where I wanna hold you tight, it feels so right tonight. Don't leave it up to you and I think the time is right, to start the fight. One more night, I wanna be with you where I wanna hold you tight, it feels so right, tonight. Don't leave it up to you and I think the time is right to start the fight. Lelich almost felt like Naomi was singing to him specifically, which would not have surprised him given the incident with the bouquet earlier. The penultimate contestant of the evening was, to everyone's shock, Captain of Squad 11, Zaraki Kenpeki. Another mission, the powers have called me away. Another time to carry the colors again. My motivation, an oath I've sworn to defend to win the honor of coming back home again. No explanation will matter after we begin. I'm out, destroy your med spirit and then my true vocation, and now my unfortunate friend, you will discover a war you're unable to win. I'll have you know that I've become indestructible, determination that is incorruptible, from the other side a terror to behold, annihilation will be unavoidable, every broken enemy will know that their opponent had to be invincible, take a last look around while you're alive, I'm an indestructible master of war. Everyone was stunned, no one had any idea that Kenpeki had any form of ability to sing. Everyone expected it to be awful and it really wasn't. The last contestant of the night came on stage was Lelich. No one expected his choice of song, but he knew all of those who supported him would understand why he picked it. I took a walk around the world just to ease my troubled mind. I left my body lying somewhere in the sense of time. And I watched the world float to the dark side of the moon. I feel there's nothing I can do. Yeah. I watched the world float to the dark side of the moon. After all, I knew it had to be something to do with you. I really don't mind what happens now and then. So long as you'll be my friend at the end. If I go crazy, would you still call me Superman? If I'm alive and well, will you be there holding my hand? I'll keep you by my side with my superhuman might, Kryptonite. By the end of the song, Lelouch had the entire female crowd in the palm of his hand. Hyukaka reached the stage and announced that voting would be taken on the way out from the reception, and the winner would be announced in an article in the Siriti Communication. At the end of the evening, the guests began to leave. Arrangements had been made to compensate for Ichigo and his comrades. Ichigo and his classmates, as well as his dad, would be staying in the Squad 10 barracks, Lelouch's request. Orium was staying with Squad 4, since she would be part of the relief group. Urahara went back to his old division, much to Mayuri's chagrin, while Yoryuki and Soifone were compensated by their successors. Strangely enough though, Shinji and the other Vizards were missing. When Ichigo questioned Lelouch on this, the captain of Squad 10 pretended to act like he didn't know what Ichigo was talking about. The general consensus in the Soul Society was that Hirako, Shinji and the others that made up the Vizards were deceased, killed more than a century ago as hollows. Lelouch felt that such a deception would work to his advantage, even if Talbumasuk knew that the Vizards were both alive and hiding out in a southern district of Karakura town. Hisuna gave Rukia an extra big hug before leaving, now that Rukia would be staying with the Shibas. Kayan and Rukia both decided they'd delay the honeymoon until after the war was over. However, there was still the matter of Rukia becoming accustomed to her new living arrangements. The newlywed Shiba had her stuff moved from her previous home to the new one by servants while the reception was going on. As Kayan's betrothed, the two would share the master bedroom, much as her sister and Byakuya did on the Kukaki family grounds. As Rukia walked into the bedroom to retire for the evening, she wondered if perhaps she was dreaming and all of the day's events had taken place in her mind. When Kayan came up behind her though and held her gently, followed by he and Rukia locking lips, kissing each other sweetly, she knew it had to be real and her heart fluttered like the rapid beats of a hummingbird's wings. The moon was high in the sky and the lights were off. Rukia had a feeling what might happen next, but didn't know if she was ready. It was Kayan and she trusted him, but this was a big deal for her. The man had experience most definitely when he was married to Miyako, but Rukia had never had the pleasure of being a real woman. She wanted to do it though, she loved Kayan and wanted him, but she was just nervous was all. As she lay on her back shoulders against the pillows of the king-sized bed, disrobed, she looked Kayan's gentle smile as he hovered over her, the moon shining in through the window in between the bookshelves. She held out her left hand and Kayan took it, drawing closer to her. "Please be gentle with me," she told Kayan. "You know I will," he told her. Kayan leaned down and kissed his wife. Rukia wrapped her arms around her husband, holding him to her. When they broke away, Kayan positioned himself over Rukia, preparing to do the part that could not be undone. He went slowly as Rukia yelped, gripping the bed sheets tightly. A sharp pain ran through the sixth seat's body, but it eventually died down and Rukia adjusted to having Kayan inside her. "Inside me, this is really happening. I'm really Mrs. Shiba." Rukia let the sensation of what was occurring flow through her. She was so happy. "I'm going to move now, okay Rukia?" Kayan told her. "Just be gentle," Rukia whispered. "Of course," Kayan responded. Kayan deflowered Rukia and the younger Sayuri sibling at the end of it all joined her sister in becoming a real woman. She lay down with Kayan in his arms and the two shared their first night together of what would be the rest of their lives. The next day, Shisato sat at her desk, poring over her paperwork. She wanted to be over and done with her work as soon as possible so that she could spend the rest of the day training. The battle against the Arrancar was coming and all senior officers were encouraged to participate, but only the captains and vice-captains were required to do so. As Shisato set aside the papers on her desk into the conspicuously marked out bin, she pulled out the last sheet of paper that she had to work on. She had done nothing more than merely sign her name at the top when there was a knock on her door. "It's unlocked," Shisato responded, continuing to write. The door opened and her visitor greeted her rather informally. Hey there Shisato, you seem well. Shisato's head sprang up at attention in recognition of the voice. Standing by the door with his hairless head in full view was Ikeku. Ikeku, what are you doing here? Shisato asked. She hadn't seen Ikeku much lately since she was promoted to third seat, same rank as him. I'm going to cut straight to the point. Ikeku said gruffly. I want to prepare for the upcoming battle, but Yomishika's out getting himself pampered and the vice captain has Ryu under lock and key. I tried going to Tetsuzumon to join me, but the guy totally blew me off. Shisato smirked and put her utensil down. So you thought you'd come here and see if I was interested in taking you on, is that it? She asked. She started to get snappy. What am I, your last option? Hey, don't take it like that. I didn't bother you at first because despite your ability you always were so level-headed that you didn't actively engage in combat like the rest of us. I was being courteous. Ikeku defended. So you're a gentleman now, is that it? Shisato said sardonically, slowly rising to her feet. Look, are you going to fight or not? Bows, I can just go if you're going to be like this. Ikeku was starting to lose his patience. Shisato scanned over the page in front of her, filled it out as quickly and neatly as she could and then grabbed her Zanpakuto. You're on. At this same time, Lelouch and Ichigo were wrapping up what would be their final training session before the big battle. Lelouch wanted Ichigo to take it easy before the big fight, expecting it to come soon, so that he could battle at full power. Besides, at this point there was nothing more Lelouch could teach Ichigo anyway. Ichigo was currently kneeling on one knee, blade in hand laid flat across the ground. These last 2 months have been tough on you, but I have noticed a great improvement in your skills. Lelouch praised the teen. I have nothing left to teach you, Kurosaki Ichigo. From now on, if you wish to gain more strength, you must walk together with your Zanpakuto and your inner hollow. Only they can teach you anything more. Lelouch lifted up his hand. Rise now and feel what it is like to be worthy to call yourself captain class. Ichigo rose to his feet, eyes hardened, but not scowling, Tensou Zanjutsu gripped. He looked at his sword and then looked down at the forest ground next to him. He took a practice swing and the ground erupted beneath him, creating a crater 2 meters deep and just as long in diameter. He inhaled, taking in a breath of solace, then he powered down to Shikai and slung Zanjutsu over his back. He then knelt down in front of Lelouch. Thank you, sensei. He praised Lelouch with such a title. Lelouch smirked. You've become so strong, Ichigo. If times were different you would have made an excellent knight. Ichigo stood up and looked at Lelouch with a gaze that showed the determined look of someone primed for battle. I'm ready. Ichigo said. Yes you are. Lelouch said. Feel free, until the battle, to do as you please. I must complete preparations on my end. Lelouch began to walk away. I'll see you later. He used Shunpo to leave. Ichigo made his way back to the Shirai, leisurely walking through the Rokanga. Lelouch hadn't taught him anything new, or rather Ichigo had learned no new techniques, no special power-ups, no wild and crazy abilities, but instead Lelouch had hardened his reflexes, strengthened his accuracy and burned away his subconscious hesitation. Ichigo now didn't have to think while in battle. He was like a war veteran that had drills beaten into him time and again. Ichigo would know what to do when the time came. As he reached the Shirai and entered the markets, he wondered what he should do with the free time he had. He had expected to be training right up until the last day of battle, but apparently Lelouch had some idea when Talbumasuk would be striking, so now the teen had an indefinite amount of time to himself and didn't know what to do with it. However, as he spotted a head of burnt orange hair he instantly knew how he was going to spend his time. He raised his hand and waved. Orium. His girlfriend was hunched over one of the market stalls looking at fruit and nuts, but when she heard her name called out she turned around and a big smile appeared on her face as she saw Ichigo and waved back. Ichigo-kun. She ran towards him and smiled sweetly at him standing in front of him with her right arm crossed over behind her back, grabbing her left forearm. She hadn't brought many changes of clothes with her, so besides her school uniform and one pair of clothes, she didn't have much to wear other than what she had worn in Hueco Mundo. Not that she minded, it was probably the most comfortable thing she owned and it was very well aired out in a manner similar to a shiakusho. She figured she might wear it on the battlefield if she had nothing else. I didn't expect to see you back so soon. Did Lamperouge-kun let you go early? She asked her boyfriend. I'm done with training actually until the war. Lelich said he's taught me all that he can teach me, so I don't have anything to do. Ichigo said. Then would you mind helping me shop? I want to try out this new recipe for ramen with chocolate sauce, jelly beans, wasabi, red bean based and sliced potatoes when we get back home, and the Soul Society has such fresh ingredients. Orium said. Sure, no problem. Ichigo agreed. He helped Orium shop for her food. The teen had gotten a currency exchange courtesy of Kyokaku so that she could buy things in the Soul Society. The Shiba woman even offered to store anything that was perishable for her on the condition that Orium would owe her one later. After Orium and Ichigo left everything with the Shiba servants, all of which had been instructed by Kyokaku to help Orium when she showed up, Orium wanted to visit Rukia, but Ichigo told her that they should let Rukia have some time to get used to her new married life, since she probably wanted to be alone with Kaien anyway. Moreover, Ichigo just wanted to spend time with Orium and just Orium. He didn't know how much time there was left between now and the war, so he wanted some time to further his relationship that he had sacrificed in order to train like a fiend. Neither teen had any idea what they wanted to do, but both agreed that they wanted to be with the other. Ichigo had an idea and looked at the watch Orium had given him. If they hurried, they could do what he wanted to do. Ichigo took Orium by the hand and led her to Sokioku Hill. While the two teens walked hand in hand to the gigantic hill overlooking the Soul Society, Shisato and Ikaku had finished their match. Exhausted from their sparring, the two third seats lay their backs against the same oak tree on a grassy knoll. Shisato was so uncomfortable and hot that she slid her arms out of her kosud, leaving only her shitaji on, with her cleavage abound due to the tight confines of the cloth. She stretched her right arm up into the air, grabbing her elbow, and tensed her legs to full extension before putting her hands behind her head and laying against the tree, knees bent. Ikaku had watched the whole thing from another side of the tree with interest. I guess it's like they say, once an 11th Division member, always an 11th Division member. Shisato said. You're pretty good at Kido. I guess our division was sort of holding you back. Ikaku smirked with his head back against the tree and his hands folded behind his head. He looked up at the sky, much like Shisato was. What can I say? I guess I'm just naturally gifted in all fields. Shisato answered. As the two rivals/friends sat underneath the tree, clouds floating overhead, Shisato decided to start up a random conversation. Say, Ikaku, she began, what are your plans for the future? Ikaku scratched his bald head. I don't know. Never really gave it much thought, to be honest. My captain once said, always look forward towards tomorrow with your head held high and your entire body faced front. Do not cling to the past or the present, or you will be left behind in time, unable to move forward. You must always walk along time's river, never fighting against the current, lest you lose yourself. He's repeated this, of course, and even has several other interesting short speeches, but ever since he said that one in particular, I've thought about what it is I want to do with my life, other than being a soul reaper. Don't you feel that there could be more to your life than just fighting? Shisato asked. I don't know. Ikaku said, folding his arms over his Zanpakuto that was in his lap, closing his eyes. I don't like to do too much thinking. For me, I've always wondered what it would be like to settle down, start a family and take up an everyday job, like Ishine-san. And also they have these things in the world of the living. They're like bikes, but they run on engines. I've always wanted to ride on one. Shisato said. In the Soul Society there was no word in the dictionary for motorcycle. Man, talk about simple aspirations. Ikaku mulled over. Hey. Shisato punched them lightly in the arm. At least I have ambitions, mister, I don't like to think. Ikaku turned his head, cheeks turning slightly red. Shisato hadn't noticed it, but the sharp turn of her body had caused her chest to bounce. Coupled with Ikaku's already grumpy attitude, the results were obvious. Hey, it's not like I said I didn't have ambitions. It's just not something I've ever given much thought to. Ikaku thought for a moment. Well, I've already decided how I want to die, and that's as one of Zaraki Teiko's men, so to settle down and become normal doesn't really appeal to me. I am a soldier and I will fight and die like one. Geez, Shisato puffed her cheeks, why is everyone from your squad like that? You're all so stuffy. All you think about is battle. If you love fighting so much, why don't you marry it? You make it sound like fighting is a tangible object rather than a concept, but I hear what you're trying to say. You don't have to get all worked up about it though. Ikeko said calmly. Still, I feel there's no reason to have any ambitions because, as a soldier, if I die not fulfilling those ambitions, I'll feel like my life was pointless. That's why my only goal is to fight and die under Zaraki Teiko and to be defeated by an enemy that pushed me to my very limits. That's all I want out of this life, anything else is a welcome addition. Ikeko said. Suo, you've never gotten any, have you? Shisato asked, jokingly. Ikeko snapped. What the hell did you just say? Shisato laughed. Sorry, I couldn't resist. She waved her hand flippantly and then wiped a tear from her eye. You never change, Ikeko. Ikeko grumbled under his breath. You know, for your information, Yumi Chika and I visited a few brothels before we became Soul Reapers, so butt out. Is that so? Shisato said, turning back to look up towards the sky. Why did you even bring it up anyway? Ikeko asked, still annoyed. Just curious is all. We've been comrades for so long I didn't think it was a big deal. Shisato said. Oh yeah? So then how much have you gone through? With your body I bet you could get anyone you want. Ikeko said. He then reached down to his right and picked up the canteen of sake he had yet to use and took a sip from it before wiping his mouth. He then handed it to Shisato. She graciously accepted it and took a drink before answering. You're right, I could, but I don't unless I want to. Shisato could count her partners in the last century on her hands. Hirako Shinji was her first, Samakura Yasuai of Squad 2, Keshiba Ryu while he was still in Squad 6, Kurosaki Hine for the time when he was her vice-captain until she moved on to the dreamy 8th seat of Squad 4, Ajido Harunobu, and while she was in the Phantoms she was seeing Kira Izuru before going back to Yasuai, but that relationship ended during a really bad breakup while Lelich was locked up in jail. She had thought of putting the moves on the current captain of Squad 5 or trying to get into her own captain's pants, but she had a feeling she'd soon be finding a sword at her throat from another bachelorette after either captain's heart if she tried. Right now she had no one, not that she minded. So who are the lucky guys that have gotten you howling? Ikeko asked. To be honest, only Hine-san and Samakura-kun were ever really able to get me off out of the 6 people I've been with. No one else could really cut it. Shisato responded. She handed Ikeko back the sake. What? Ikeko groaned in disbelief. You saw that pretty boy? He was referring to Yasuai, of course. He took a drink and gave the bottle back to Shisato. I did, and he was a damn well good partner, but he just doesn't understand me. Shisato sighed and took another drink. No one does really. She chucked the canteen back at Ikeko. I find it hard to believe that no one understands you. Ikeko said as he took a drink before giving the sake bottle back to Shisato. Most guys just look at me like I'm a sex object, that's why I never accepted advances from Hisagi Fukutaiko. Shisato took another drink. The alcohol was starting to get to her. I'm more than just a pretty face, but no one, she hiccuped, understands that. She stood up, starting to sound drunk. Well, women can be fighters too, yeah, no. She stumbled and began to fall backwards off the knoll. Ikeko sprang to his feet and let her fall into him so that she didn't hurt herself. Ikeko noticed the sake pouring out onto the grass. Ah man, he loosely laid Shisato down on the slanted ground and yanked the canteen out of her hands. This is high-quality sake. He dumped what was left of it into his mouth, which was barely the amount a Dixie cup would hold. God damn it. He tossed aside the canteen in annoyance and sat down on the grass. As he made to get Shisato back up, he saw the sweat dribbling into her cleavage from her slightly open shitagi. His pants grew tight and Shisato smiled up at him from the ground before lightly grabbing at his ankles with both her hands. Lay down with me, Ikeko, she said. Ikeko wasn't one to refuse a request from a pretty girl, so he lay down next to Shisato only for her to roll on top of him. She breathed on his face and straddled his body, and everything that happened after that on that knoll will stay on that knoll, for now. The sun was growing close to setting over the horizon. Ichigo was still leading Orium by the hand to the top of Sokioku Hill. He looked at his watch. We can make this. They reached the top of the hill and broke through the clearing. So what was it you wanted to show me, Ichigo-kun? Orium asked. Ichigo led her over towards the edge of the hill and gestured to the scenic view of the Soul Society at sunset. It was a magnificent view of shades of purple, orange, red, yellow, and blue that looked so majestic at the altitude the couple was at. This was what I wanted to show you, Ichigo told her. Wow. Orium was captivated by the scene. It's so pretty. She gaped at the scene. Not as pretty as you, Ichigo told her. The teen, despite being a scowling punk, was actually quite the romantic when it came down to it. Never did he think that his childhood friend's best friend would wind up being the one. Orium blushed at the compliment as Ichigo turned her to face him and brought her lips to his. He had grown to love how they tasted. He had grown to love and adore his girlfriend and cared for her more than any other person in existence. Ichigo-kun, that was so passionate. Orium didn't have anything else to say and just latched back onto her boyfriend as the two kissed again. When it ended, Ichigo put his hands on Orium's shoulders. No matter what happens on the battlefield, I want you to know how much I care about you. Orium removed Ichigo's hands from her shoulders and held them. Please don't say things like that, it makes you sound like you're afraid that you or I might die. We won't die. We'll always be together. Ichigo-kun is so strong and brave that he'll always protect me, and I'll always protect Ichigo-kun and heal him when he gets hurt. That's how it will always be between us. Orium. The couple kissed again and then watched the sun disappear over the horizon. Afterwards, Ichigo scooped up Orium in his arms and flew her through the air until they arrived at the 10th division where they were both staying. As she was cradled in his arms, Orium felt like a real princess being held by her knight in shining armor. It was as if Sokioku Hill was a burning tower that Ichigo had just rescued her from. Orium's face was never so red except that time after her and Ichigo kissed after Ichigo rescued her from needles. They entered into the barracks and made their way to the guest rooms where they were both staying. Their rooms were in the same corridor, just down the hall from one another. Ichigo's was a little farther down the corridor, so he walked right by Orium's room, but as he passed it she placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Come stay with me in my room tonight, Orium encouraged. Ever since Ichigo had entered into her day, the moment between them had grown into something so indescribable. It was beyond romantic and majestic. Unless Ichigo blatantly said no, nothing could ruin the moment and beautiful atmosphere between them. Staying with Orium was nothing Ichigo hadn't done before. They had shared a bed on the evening of Christmas Day, but somehow Ichigo felt that there would be more than just laying with each other if he said yes. Even so, he knew better than to refuse such an innocent request from his girlfriend. What sane man would? Ichigo followed Orium into her bedroom and set Zanjitsu down against the wall by the door. Like the others, the guest rooms were supplied with full-sized beds. Orium closed the door and walked up behind Ichigo and hugged him from behind. Ichigo turned around and held her to him. I'm so glad we can be together, Orium mumbled. A regular smile was on Ichigo's face as he wrapped his arms all the way around her, turning the sleeves of his shiakusho into a blanket. They stood there in the darkness holding each other when Orium looked up into Ichigo's deep brown eyes and suddenly felt as if an enchanted force was taking a hold of her. She reached up and slid her right hand into Ichigo's shiakusho and placed her hand firmly on his chest. From this action, Ichigo himself was starting to find it hard not to become aroused and overtaken by the magical atmosphere that was encompassing the space around him and Orium. He swallowed, turning a little red, hoping he wasn't about to be slapped and called a pervert, but he was having trouble, with everything the way it was resisting. Can I touch you, Orium? He asked. The teen hiccuped and nearly lost her breath. She hadn't expected the question to come so bluntly and so suddenly, but the fact that Ichigo had asked her let her know that he respected her and that he would never do anything to hurt her. He was putting her wants ahead of his, and that's one of the reasons why she loved him. Of course you can, Orium said. It's okay if it's you. Orium smiled. Ichigo reached up and placed his hand on Orium's large rack that caught the attention of almost every male, and several girls, in his high school, and then some. It's soft, he thought. He began exploring his girlfriend's ample bust, every curve, every inch. Orium was starting to feel a little turned on. Her body was reacting to his touch, though it was very light, like the way a paintbrush stroke gently glided over the canvas. Orium pivoted her foot and turned around with Ichigo, and the two were soon sitting on the bed. They locked lips again, and then Ichigo began moving and playing with Orium's soft breasts. Orium felt her face growing hot. She was becoming very sensitive to Ichigo's touch and suddenly felt as if she wanted more. She reached out and gently pushed his hand to the side and undid the zipper at the top of her outfit, removing the cape-like overcoat from her body, discarding it to the side. This included her sleeves and the strap around her waist. Now all that remained was the sleeveless, strapless dress underneath. Ichigo thought that would be the end of it, but became odd when Orium reached behind her back and pulled down the zipper that kept her dress attached to her body. She let it cascade to the floor, stripping down to just her white bra and panties. Ichigo gaped like a goldfish on meth as he stared at Orium's unmarred beauty. Orium wrapped her arms around Ichigo's neck and smiled at him so sweetly. "I love you, Ichigo," she said to him. "I love you too," he told her and leaned down and kissed her. The action just seemed natural. He leaned back up and put his hand back on Orium's chest. He squeezed her breast a little bit as he felt the soft flesh that poked through Orium's bra, begging to be set free. He slid his hand to the center of her chest, in between her mounds, and hovered, looking at Orium for consent or disapproval. She simply smiled at him. "Go ahead." Ichigo removed her bra and discarded it to the ground with her other clothes. He then began fondling Orium's chest so masterfully. No one seeing the scene would think he was a virgin with the way he played with her boobs. Orium put her arm above her head and moaned in delight from her boyfriend's touch. "Why yes, touch me, Ichigo. You can touch me however you like, it's okay as long as it's you. You're the only one allowed to touch me like this," Orium told him. Ichigo continued to fondle Orium's chest and then snaked one hand down around her stomach, making her shiver until he came to her panties, stopping and once again waiting for consent. Down there." She blushed. She didn't know if they were rushing too quickly into things. She and Ichigo had been together for only a little over a month. Was it too soon? Should she stop this before things went too far, or, no, she thought, it's fine like this. As long as it's Ichigo-kun, it's perfectly fine. Orium smiled again and nodded to him. Ichigo slid one finger into her and felt how excessively wet she was. Orium was becoming very horny and wanted him very badly. "Let's do it," Orium eventually said. This shocked Ichigo. All the way after having just gotten to this part the first time? Like Orium, he didn't know if this was too soon, not to mention he didn't have protection with him. "Are you sure?" he asked. "You don't? I mean, I don't have." Orium figured out what he was trying to explain to her, but she knew they could take the risk for a very good reason. "It's okay," she said. She covered her face with her other hand, peeking through it, flushing. I'm a virgin, so. You too?" Ichigo asked. Orium was both surprised and not to hear that coming from Ichigo. Common sense could tell her that she was his first girlfriend, but somewhere in the back of her mind the strange idea of a shadowy figure of a woman visiting Ichigo in the middle of the night and whispering sweet nothings into his ear while taking him and he to her was just something she couldn't get out of her head, but that was all pointless now because now she and Ichigo would take each other's virginity. "Why yes, so please." Orium removed her hand from her face and held it under her chin. "Be gentle." "Of course," Ichigo said and slowly positioned himself over Orium. "I can't believe that I'm really doing this. It feels so unreal." Slowly he entered her and entered all the way inside of her. Orium cried out in pain when her hymen broke, but Ichigo kissed her until the pain went away. The two of them shared a special moment, taking their relationship the farthest they could at their age. After the experience they stayed with each other and cuddled, knowing that the only way they would know that what had just occurred was not a dream was the fact that they would wake up together, holding each other so close. 2 days later. Early that morning, having stayed in the research bureau the night before, Lelich had woken up to the incessant beeping of a rectangular device of sorts he had been carrying around with him for the past few days. He knew what the beeping meant. So today's the day. Lelich grabbed his Haori hanging on the back of a chair and slipped on his Waragi and Tabi. Lelich-sama, what is it? Nimue asked, rousing from her sleep. Nimue, assemble all of the vice-captains in the proper meeting hall. Lelich said. We're going to battle. What? You mean? Yes. Lelich nodded. I left a tripwire of sorts in the Garganta when I came back from Hueco Mundo. If several presences of captain-level Ryotsu were detected, that it would trip this device, signaling us. We have approximately 1 hour to prepare for Talbumasuke's arrival. I can't waste any time. Lelich and the other captains met at assembly, and Urahara was asked to escort Ichigo, his friends, and the vice-captains into the hall. The second-in-commands would stand by their captains, and all of the senior officers who would be joining in the fighting were also at the assembly. The battlefront of the Godai consisted of all of the captains, all of the vice-captains, the third seats of squads 2, 6, 10, 11, and 13, the fourth and fifth seats of squads 2 and 11, Shiba Kyukaku, Shiba Rukia, Yukatake Vera, and the top 7 seats of Squad 4 for relief purposes, though Anohana and Isane were permitted to enter battle if the situation called for it, since Anohana was a senior captain and Isane was known to have considerable combat efficiency since the head captain knew of her being a phantom. Also in the group was Kurosaki Ichigo, Ishida Uryu, Sato Yasutara, Fong Shaolin, Urahara Kisuke, Kurosaki Ishine, Shihoin Yoriyuki, and Arisawa Tatsuki. Orium would be cooperating with the 4th Division as a healer for the gravest injuries. Now is the time we have been preparing for. The booming voice of the head captain sounded. I will not make a pretty speech, after all, with few exceptions, as discussed amongst the 13 captains in our last regularly scheduled meeting. I will not be the one directly controlling the flow of today's battle. Today, unless I dictate otherwise, consider my voice to be the voice of the captain of Squad 10, Lamperouge Lelich. He is the most brilliant mind we have and the most tactful captain to ever grace the ranks of the Godai. Although inexperienced as a captain, he has had the mindset of being one for so long. He was the one who removed what could have been our greatest threat, Aizen Sosuke, former captain of Squad 5, from the picture. Now, we must deal with what might be an even greater threat, a Tremere Talbumasuke of the fallen Tremere noble house. Lamperouge Teiko, you have the floor. All eyes turned to Lelich as he walked where everyone could see him. My fellow allies, I'll make this as brief as I can since time is of the essence. He walked into place, back still to half of the room. I stand before you today not as a captain nor as a soul reaper, but as a harbinger of absolute justice. Lelich snapped his heel and turned to face his comrades. He struck a pose, sticking his left arm out, fingers spread wide, right arm down at his side as his Haori flapped up and down from the wind force created from the spin. Today, I am law. Today, I am the voice of reason. Today, there is no glory. Today, there is no honor. Today, we commit violent bloodshed to wipe a madman off the face of existence. And to do that, Lelich rolled up his sleeve, revealing a blue and black wristband with a red face. I must assume the role of absolute leadership. Today, I am Zero. There was flash of bright light as Lelich transformed. His outfit was not the one when he took the form of Zero as part of the Phantoms. He was wearing a uniform identical in color to that of his original Zero uniform, but over the uniform he wore his prized Kido vest, and instead of his usual Zero cape he wore his Haori, formed into a cape. His Zero helmet was the same as it ever was, though. The suit was more than just a fashion statement. Lelich had interwoven the fabric with several enchantments that would allow him to telepathically communicate with his allies at will using a receiver in the helmet. On top of that, because he didn't want to drag down the rest of the team, he equipped the suit to supercharge his stamina and Hakuda, but he planned on using such capabilities sparingly. He knew the front lines were not his forte, but that didn't mean he wasn't going to fight with everything he possibly could. We will defend Karakura Town with the force of our very life. Understand that as long as one of us is left standing, the battle is not over. Until the last of our forces fall, our side shall not yield. Until the last of the Arrancar and Talbumasuke lay defeated or killed at our feet, the battle is not yet won. Do not show your enemy mercy. It will be kill or be killed out there, absolute chaos. Now, Lelich flexed his hand towards the closed door and it opened, revealing uncountable amounts of hell butterflies. Let's go. The army began departing one by one and headed to the field of battle. The Soul Reapers were already set into position, pre-chosen by Lelich, and the Godi I-13, and its allies, were prepared to make their standoff no less than 20 minutes before Talbumasuk and his company arrived. Talbumasuk was at the helm of his forces, same for Lelich being at the helm of his. Talbumasuk, Lelich said, Haori flapping in the breeze. 0. Talbumasuk said with a cool smile that his sensei would have been proud to see him wear. It twisted him in knots to see that Lelich had the audacity to take the form of his alternate identity that stole his father and his house from him. The only people that had survived that catastrophic fire were his mother and sister. However, he wasn't about to show that on his face. He had learned better since their last encounter. I must say I didn't expect to see you at the helm of the group. I thought for sure the head captain would be. Speaking of which, where is he? Lelich was standing alone in the center of the battlefield, staring down Talbumasuk's troops. He had done so on purpose. Everyone else was cloaked or hidden, preparing to strike when commanded. I am the king, and you know my motto, so there's no reason for me to waste my breath in saying it. Lelich stated. Quite right. Talbumasuk said and closed his eyes momentarily and tilted his head up and to the right side, taking note of the many riots scattered about the area. So it's an ambush? How clever and predictable. You have the option, though I doubt you'll take it, Lelich said to him, to surrender now and we will let you and your subordinates live. I'll pass. Talbumasuk responded, opening his eyes and returning to giving that same cool glance as the right side of his hair wiggled in the high-altitude breeze. I knew you would say that. I just had to try though, protocol and all. Lelich said. Let's skip the formalities. I came here seeking a fight. Shall we commence our little game or are we just going to stare at each other all day? Talbumasuk asked. I see your sensei, my former arch-nemesis, has rubbed off on you in these last few months. Lelich chuckled. The old Talbumasuk probably would have called for an all-out attack, but the one standing before him was about to treat the current setup like a chess match, no, not like a chess match, like a more realistic game of war. Lelich had cast fog to hide his troops and Talbumasuk's unit was at full force. The dice were in the Arrancar Lord's hands. It was a simple matter of how he would cast them. Lelich smirked. This may prove to be interesting after all. Lelich swung his arm out at his side. Let's go. As you wish. Talbumasuk raised his hand into the air and prepared to give his first order. To be continued. Chapter 75, Lelich vs Talbumasuk, the war begins. Third-person POV. Talbumasuk raised his hand and without saying anything brought it down slowly as if he was lazily throwing a ball, but his hand came down with his index finger and pinky extended with his thumb and middle finger together. He then curled in his ring finger and pink and snapped his fingers. Far away from where Lelich and Talbumasuk were standing on air, a jolt ran through Orium's body. She was dressed in a mini-skirt version of the Shiakusho with black satin gloves. Her hairpins gave off a bright glow and Orium felt her body become heavy. Orium, what's the matter? Ichigo asked, alarmed as a squeak emitted from her body. Orium felt dizzy. What's happening, to me? She tried to look at her hands, but moving her arms proved to be very difficult. My body feels heavy. She suddenly levitated 2 inches off the ground and spontaneously lost consciousness. Her head rolled back and her body went limp. Orium. Ichigo dashed towards her, but was repelled by some form of force and Orium was suddenly trapped inside a rotating prism that was dark, but glossy, yellow, practically goldenrod in color. She's trapped. Tatsuki declared. I'll get her out. Ichigo prepared to swing his Zanpakuto and break open the prism. Kurosaki. Stop. Urayu shouted. What? Why? Ichigo wanted to know. You might hurt Orium. Tatsuki told him. But if I do nothing? Ichigo didn't want to think of what this development might mean or a worst-case scenario. Ichigo, what happened? Lelich's telepathic communication rang into his head. Orium got captured inside some weird prism. We don't know how it happened. Ichigo thought back. Back where he was, Lelouch ceased his communication and looked at Talbumasuk. I see you've come to realize the result of my actions just now. Talbumasuk said, hands in his pockets. The human girl, Inu Orium, has a power so great that even if I were to kill each and every one of you, she could revive you and it would be like nothing happened. If that's the case, then why not just kill her? Lelouch asked. Remember how I lured you all to rescue her into Hueco Mundo? I was testing the limits of the power of the bonds of friendship between Kurosaki Ichigo and his friends, and I determined that, with her godlike ability, Orium was incredibly powerful if she were on the other side, but killing her would set off your biggest X factor into a flying rage of which I would not be prepared for if he did that at the start. A heroic entity pissed off because his girlfriend or other friend was killed is not something I care to deal with so early in the battle, so, instead, I immobilized her. She's protected because the barrier is kept intact by my life force so long as we exist in the same dimension or world. The prism cannot be touched and she cannot be released. Doing so would be catastrophic to her as well as those around. How can Kurosaki Ichigo attack me with extreme vigor if I, in a way, protect his friend? He'll only go bouncing off the walls at me if I attack his other friends. Talbumasuk explained. And now that she's useless, anyone I kill stays dead. Lelouch's lip turned down slightly. Damn, that was clever. But even so, just how did you accomplish such a feat? Miss Inu's power, as I already knew from when she and her friends entered the Soul Society, comes from her hairpins. While she was in custody, I employed a Ryotsu analysis on them by coating the ceiling with the same type of Reishi particles Sale used to coat his laboratory. In doing so, I managed to seep bits of Reishi into her hairpins to activate a trap I just sprang right here and now. Talbumasuk stated. He planned all of that. There's no way Aizen had that kind of planning in his mind. Lelouch was concerned. I've dreadfully underestimated this man's level of planning. He wanted us to escape from Hueco Mundo. No matter what we did, we were dancing right in the palm of his hand, but there was nothing we could do because we were preoccupied with our own preparations with no knowledge of how his brain works. Damn it. I've been played a fool. Lelouch thought for a moment. But wait, there's a problem here. But that means you only had a little more than 12 hours to do so before we broke in. How else do you think? With the Hogyaku, of course. Talbumasuk said. What? Lelouch was confused. So Urahara didn't tell you? I'm shocked. The Hogyaku is more than just an orb that breaks down the bonds between Hollows and Soul Reapers. If it had done that, most of what has occurred in the last 9 months would not have been possible. The Hogyaku is a sort of wish-granting orb that reflects its user's deepest desires. Kukaki Rukia wanted to become normal, Arisawa Tatsuki wanted to be of use to Kurosaki Ichigo, Sato Yasutara and Inu Orium cursed their own powerlessness, and from there any small wish I put as a top priority while utilizing it makes for eliminating a lot of X factors when conducting experiments. Yes, the Hogyaku is truly a remarkable object. Damn it. Why didn't Urahara tell me any of this? Didn't he think this was important information? I could have created several countermeasures if I knew about this. Lelouch grit his teeth. What if he has the Hogyaku with him right now? Could he alter reality just by wishing for it hard enough? Damn it. I can't rule out that possibility. Shall I guess what you're thinking? Talbumasuk said. You believe that I might wish to use the Hogyaku to alter the reality of the battle. However, as great as it is, even the Hogyaku has its limitations. Also, I'd be foolish if I were to rely on such an object even I don't fully understand. It's a tool, not a toy. Was he always like this? How much of this is being taught by Aizen and how much of this is self-growth? I can't know, and he probably knows that I don't know. I can't figure him out if I don't know how to counter his power. Still, if he doesn't plan to use the Hogyaku, I still have my ace. There's a reason I'm wearing this helmet after all. Talbumasuk, it seems to me like you went through a lot of planning to prepare for this moment, but by coming to face me yourself, you've dug your own grave. He activated the slot in his helmet that revealed his eye. In the middle of the revelation, he activated Flash Step so that he got right to Talbumasuk's flank. He knew the Arrancar Lord would follow him with his eyes, and that's exactly what he wanted. He stood at Talbumasuk's right flank. With geese exposed he shouted. Atramir Talbumasuk! Kill yourself! The geese activated, but Talbumasuk showed no change in behavior and no indication that he was about to carry out Lelich's orders. What are you waiting for? Do it! Lelich shouted. Is this the same technique you used to kill my sensei? Talbumasuk asked. He stared at Lelich's eye. Lelich shut the helmet before Talbumasuk could get a good look at it, but it was too late. I've seen that emblem before, there's no use covering it up. I know that when that emblem appears in your eye your ability activates. Tell me why aren't you doing as I commanded? Lelich growled. You want to know why? Talbumasuk asked. Very well, he turned to fully face Lelich, I shall tell you, since there isn't anything you can do about it. He tilted his head in smugness to establish a sense of superiority. I've seen you use that technique twice, once against Aizen Sensei and once against Sale. Both times you went for your eyes, and when you faced Sale, using the cameras I had strung about the room I did a high-resolution zoom in and found that you seemed to be removing a lens of sorts from your eye, which tells me that you can't turn your ability off and you wear special lenses to keep commands from activating when you don't want them to. Which also tells me two things, that such an occurrence caused a tragic accident and you can only use such a technique sparingly, say perhaps once on any given individual. Lelich twitched at the words, tragic accident, as he recalled what happened to Yuffie. However, that also means that you require direct eye contact with your enemy. You looked at my sensei and Sale and me right in the eye when you commanded us, so now I have confirmed that you need direct eye contact for your ability to work. However, I was already almost certain that such was the case. If you could nullify your ability with special lenses, then obviously without them it would activate if you were talking. Talbumasuk pointed to his eye, so I created special lenses of my own. I may not know how your ability works, but I designed these lenses once again, using the Hogyaku, with the idea in mind of blocking out your ability, but without altering my vision in any sense. Even without knowing the composition of your lenses, it seems the Hogyaku itself knew from when it felt the presence of your move on my sensei. Talbumasuk put his hands back in his pockets. And don't even think about trying to use it to whittle down my numbers, I've already distributed these lenses to everyone here to protect them from your attack. Face it, Lelich, your trump card has been nullified. Lelich tensed. Even without knowing what the geese is or how it works, he was able to nullify it so efficiently. Damn it. I should have expected something like this. Still, Lelich calmed down a little, victory that way would have been rather boring. I much more prefer a match of tactics. What's the matter, Zero? You seem a little tense. Talbumasuk stated. Humph, you're no better than that fool Homura. Lelich snapped to attention negatively at the mention of Yuna's surname. She left a paper trail messy than that unkempt hair of hers. She was doomed the moment she crossed my sensei. Blinded by revenge, her path was only one of self-destruction. She never stood a chance. Lelich's Ryuryoku exploded with intensity. He stood his ground, he knew better than to be taunted, but he was pissed off. Don't you dare insult the woman I loved like that. I will make you pay for such insults. Did I strike a nerve, Lamperouge Lelich? Does the death of your former captain still plague you like a disease? Puh, no need to answer, it's obvious from your reaction. But you're all talk and no substance. If you had the confidence to strike me down in rage you would have done so, but you don't, and so. Shut up. Lelich shouted. I will not bear witness to your insults and lectures. If you're going to make a move, then make it. Very well then. Talbumasuk smiled with a slight sigh. Carthus, Nigel, Sakuratella, Maria, you know what to do. Sparga and Ciella's Fraxion took off towards the four corners of Karakura town. So you know about the fake town? Yes, Talbumasuk said, and if my calculations are correct you've guarded your towers considerably with high-level Soul Reapers, so, since I don't know who you've sent, I've sent in the strongest mid-level non-espada I could. So what say you, shall we start our own match? Talbumasuk asked. You really want to jump into the fray like that? Lelich asked. No, you're quite right. Talbumasuk pulled a small buckyball-shaped bone-like object from his pocket and then, pouring spirit energy into it, created a replica of Baragan's old throne. I'll just sit and watch for now. Lelich looked around the battlefield. I'm noticing that the King of Hollows is no longer amongst your troops. So you committed to memory my troops and their abilities, did you? I thought you might. As for Baragan, he's not here because I killed him. Talbumasuk grinned at the memory, with my bare hands. Lelich felt very uncomfortable. He could recall that file as if he was holding it in front of him. Lelich knew that by bare hands Talbumasuk was obviously referring to being able to strike down Baragan using only his Zanpakuto and Soul Reaper powers, no Hogyaku, no assistance, no technology, no turning his opponent's power against him. The fact that he could even own the kind of power to not only face the King of Hollows as an equal, but also defeat him scared Lelich. Still he refused to show his terror. So you're just going to sit there for now? That's what I'm going to do. Talbumasuk repeated. If all goes well, one of the pillars will be destroyed and the real Karakara town will come back, but even if that's not the case, there's no reason for me to expel energy without knowing the situation. The king must be able to view all of his subjects so that he may calculate his next move more efficiently. Lelich sighed in frustration lowly. I hope I picked our guardians well. Lelich had guarded the 4 pillars with 2 vice-captains and 2 senior officers. The northwestern pillar was guarded by Vice-Captain of Squad 2, Odamakakendra. She was challenged by a woman with black wavy hair sticking out in all directions like snakes. She had dark yellow eyes with pupils like a snake, sharp fangs that hung over her ruby-red lips, and light skin with tattoos shaped like twisted vines running up her forearms to her elbows. She was wearing long, skin-tight leather pants and was wearing a rather revealing cloth over her body. It properly covered her abdomen, but did not cover any part of her arms or the center of her torso and draped itself around her neck and over her D-cup breasts. Several chains and necklaces hung from her neck, and tying the cloth in place on her body was an elastic band of 3 connected strings. Her hollow hole was located in the center of her chest above her breasts. Her Zanpakuto, sheathed diagonally across her back, was shaped like a scimitar. What is your name, Soul Reaper? She asked, hissing every time an S sound escaped her lips. I am called Odamakakendra, Vice-Captain of Squad 2, and you are? Kendra asked. I am the majestic sorceress over Hueco Mundo under the Great Queen of Poison, Ciela Mito. You can call me Sakaratella Mursa. Sakaratella replied. Charmed, Kendra said and drew out her katana. Let's go. The northeastern pillar was guarded by Naomi. Her opponent was Spargas Busti, black-haired, axe-wielding Fraxion, Maria Rosalita Samazelia. Name. Naomi stated. Why would you want to know that? Do 2 enemies need to know each other's names? Maria asked. Lamperouge Teiko always taught us that it is good to learn the names of truly powerful opponents, for they are the challenges you remember. Naomi replied. Then just call me Sama. Maria replied. You don't look like a lady to me. Naomi said. Huh. Maria was confused. Naomi talked fast to explain herself. We have an honorific in our language and Sama is the honorific when referring to someone, so. Gah. I don't care, let's go. Maria spun her axe and prepared to fight. Wait. Don't you want to know my name? Naomi asked. Not really, no. I've yet to meet a Soul Reaper I could not destroy. Maria answered. Well, you haven't met me. Naomi said. I'm the head of the Reverse Counter Force, 5th seat of Squad 2 and former Crystal Phantom Libra Naomi, though I shouldn't have told you that last Paraic. Maria attacked Naomi before she could finish talking, but missed. You know that was rude. I was talking. Naomi said. If you're a member of Squad 2, you shouldn't talk as often, or are you a failure as an assassin? Failure of an assassin. Naomi said. I see you don't know who you're dealing with. She ripped out her Zanpakuto and whipped it out behind her. Race across the sky, Yokanene Kaze. Her sword burst forth with bright green energy and turned into a gigantic, pure spirit energy, Tonfa. Allow me to show you my killing potential. Maria looked at Naomi with a glazed look, uncaring for her pun. Seriously? Naomi laughed, standing up straight. Haha, yeah, that joke was kind of. Maria attacked while Naomi's guard was down, but Naomi blocked effectively with her tonfa as she turned her body sideways, blocking Maria's vertical attack with the flat end of the weapon. "You will never catch me off guard," Naomi said seriously. "I'm too well trained for that." She charged energy into her weapon and with force, swung and pushed Maria back as a gust of air followed Naomi's swing. "Get ready, cause here I come." Naomi crouched down low and pounced. As the fight between Naomi and Maria kicked off, down at the southeastern pillar was Renji. Lelouch recognized that, with Bankai, Renji would be more than a match for a single Arrancar that was not Espada level, and he figured that was all Talbumasuk would send after the Greenhorn vice-captain. Lelouch knew that, with Renji's luck, he'd face a poor matchup if Lelouch did not set up the battlefield in the vice-captain's favor, so, as he correctly predicted, a strong mid-level, non-Espada was headed his way. With everything the vice-captain had been through, Lelouch knew Renji needed a win and a practical chance at redemption, and this was the opportunity he was giving him. Of course, if he screwed it up, he had Yachira waiting in lieu on backup. He figured that having to be bailed out by someone who appeared to be 5 to 8 years old would give Renji extra incentive not to lose. Not to mention that Yachira was amongst the more powerful vice-captains in the Godai, even without Bankai, and if she ran into trouble, Lelouch knew that Kenpeka would definitely step in to give a hand and the Arrancar would be a thing of the past. Renji's opponent turned out to be Nigel, the brown-haired, also greenhorn, Arrancar of Spargus Fraction. He had a chainsaw blade on a staff for a Zanpakuto and was one of the least experienced Arrancar in Talbumasuk's unit, but his Ryotsu suggested hidden power and hidden potential, which is why he sent him. "So you're my opponent?" Nigel asked. "Yeah, the name's Abarai Renji, vice-captain of Squad 6, and you?" Renji asked. "Ah, I've heard about you. According to Victor Nyisama, who read up on you guys for the sake of our unit, you're considered the greenhorn amongst the vice-captains, but you're also one of the only ones with Bankai." Nigel smirked. Sparga had become a part of the Espada after the invasion, and Talbumasuk had had ample time to learn about Kayan's Bankai and add it to the records. "I guess that's fitting, since I'm one of the least experienced Arrancar in the army, that I would face you. A battle of greenhorns, this should be interesting," Nigel stated. "Bring it on," Renji encouraged. "Gladly." Nigel revved up his Zanpakuto and charged forward. The battle had begun. And finally, down at the southwestern pillar, was Ikeku, Shikai already out. Lelouch knew about Ikeku's Bankai as he had learned about it both from Renji and from Shisato. The former knew about it, the latter speculated such from his Ryotsu levels. Lelouch had confronted Ikeku on it and, after pressing him, managed to get Ikeku to fess up, but met with resistance of its usage and was ultimately forced to resort to geese. The command was during the battle against Talbumasuk's forces: "If you are ultimately about to be wiped out, you will use your Bankai. I will not let your pride affect the mission." With 2 Bankai users and 2 assassins covering the pillars, Lelouch felt that he would be able to protect the pillars. What he didn't know was that Talbumasuk wasn't about to play with 4 cards in every set. Ikeku's opponent was a high-level non-Espada. The only one Talbumasuk had sent out, and that was on purpose. The Arrancar he had selected, Karthus, was a monster. In fact, he had the same kind of durability as the fabled Kenpakus of the Soul Society. He could take so many hits and keep on kicking. In fact, Karthus had all the capabilities of becoming a low-power level Espada, but formally rejected the offer in order to serve under Ciela. Karthus was the bodyguard to his queen and refused to directly serve under anyone except her. In truth, he was potentially one of the most powerful Ajichas in all of Hueco Mundo, clearly captain level. He was Talbumasuk's first trump card and was about to be played. Karthus, while sealed up, was covered in hollow armor on his upper body. It restricted the movement of his arms and legs, but it made him damn tough to pierce. Even his face was covered by this armor, with only his nose penetrating through it. There were nails in his head and along his back. Karthus' fists were huge as they were covered by massive gauntlets with reinforced knuckles. His lower body consisted of a pair of torn sweatpants down by the ankles, Karthus' thick grey-red ankles. His lower body was not as armored as his upper body, allowing Karthus to be fast on his feet. His hollow hole was beneath his armor and therefore not currently visible, and his Zanpakuto was a giant butcher knife hooked into the nails along his back. He towered over Ikeku at a height of 7 feet 5 inches. "Geez, you come from a monster film or something?" Ikeku asked. "Brgh." Carthus snorted. "I am her ladyship Ciella's bodyguard. As such I must be as efficient as possible, and to properly guard her, I myself must be properly guarded." "Well, you certainly seem well guarded. Hope that armor isn't just for show." "What's your name, big guy?" Ikeku asked. "I am Carthus Daragos." Carthus answered. "I am the warrior supreme under her ladyship the Queen of Poison, Ciella Mito." "Warrior supreme, huh? Well, let's see how good you are against me. I am the third seed of Squad 11, Madarame Ikeku." Ikeku charged forward at Carthus with his Shikai to begin their confrontation. Back at the northwestern end, Kendra and Sakaratella had begun their battle. With their swords drawn, the two women clashed against each other. With both their blades hacking at the enemy's right side, the blades clanged and slid off each other. Both women spun counterclockwise and connected their blades into each other from backhand slashes. Kendra then disappeared with her amazing speed and tried to attack Sakaratella from above, moving so fast it looked like there were 3 of her as she brought her sword down upon the Fraxion as if determined to use the woman's skull as a pedestal for her Zanpakuto. Sakaratella dodged to Kendra's right with a jump before Kendra impacted, and the vice-captain missed, landing on the air on her knees, sword planted down, but as Sakaratella took a swing at her shoulder she vanished again and this time stabbed Sakaratella right in the back. Kendra wasn't the strongest Soul Reaper, but hot damn was she one of the fastest. In fact, she was the fastest vice-captain, bar none. With her Zanpakuto tip lodged in Sakaratella's back in between her dorsal muscles and lower back, the right of the Arrancar's spine, Kendra slashed her sword out of Sakaratella and then bashed her shoulder into the Arrancar's back before leaping into the air at an ankle and planting several fierce kicks into the Arrancar's shoulder height area. The first few were slow, but fierce, and then Kendra picked up her speed, jackhammering her feet into Sakaratella's center upper back before pushing off the Arrancar's back and coming in close once again and bringing her blade down along the Arrancar's armor and slashing down, breaking through the first band of armor on Sakaratella's back. The Arrancar turned around and swung, but Kendra did a magnificent gymnastic backflip through the air with her legs together and her arms spread wide, landing perfectly on her feet a few sword lengths from her enemy. Sakaratella rushed in, taking a wide swing. Kendra dodged back into the side and back into the side again as Sakaratella swung down vertically with both hands. She then twisted her body and launched herself forward in a corkscrew motion to try and throw Kendra off, but the patrol corps leader simply dodge-rolled to the side and spun around Sakaratella before popping up right behind her and slashing horizontally, creating another nick along her back. Sakaratella turned to face her enemy as Kendra held her sword up at a 45-degree angle in front of her, ready for the next exchange. "You're not bad, Otamaka Kendra. Our armor is 3 times as dense as the arrow that covers our body. The fact that you pierced mine with only a sealed blade shows just how capable you are as a high-ranking member of the Onmitsukido, but unfortunately playtime is over." Black and green energy began to seep around her legs as she held Zanpakuto upside down. "Allow me to show you the true extent of my power." Sakaratella opened her mouth and dangled her Zanpakuto in front of it. "I don't like the looks of this," Kendra said, getting more defensive. "Confuse, Chamanda Cranios." Shaman of Skulls, Sakaratella bit off the tip of her blade and black and green energy surged around her as her Zanpakuto dissolved, covering her in a flame of the exact same color of the energy surrounding her. The flame organized itself into the formation one might see from a torch, and then Sakaratella reached through the flames, vibrant red nails accenting her arms, along with bracelets made of skulls. Her tattoos remained. She rotated her arm in a clockwise motion, half a circle, and then thrust it forward, dispersing the flame. Sakaratella's eyes were accented with thick black eyeshadow, and her necklaces from before were now wreaths of skulls around her neck. Instead of her twisted armor, she wore a breastplate with a flat skull-shaped pattern. The breastplate did not cover abdomen, and around her waist was a hardened pair of panties, tied around her legs with leather rope. Sakaratella's legs were completely uncovered, and she had long luscious legs with red painted toenails. She wore 2 anklets on her legs, also made of skulls. She also had skull earrings. She then placed her hand on her weapon, a whip made linked together with leather and human-shaped skulls. "Ready for round 2?" Sakaratella asked. She tugged on the whip and then let go of it with her left hand and whipped it forward with her right, spitting up a group of 3 red orbs that hovered for a few moments. They were Balas. Kendra cartwheeled to the left to dodge the first, bashed the second one away with her sword and then jumped over the first one and spun through the air towards Sakaratella. That won't work. Sakaratella laughed. She took in a deep breath and screeched, creating a horrible noise and a powerful, banshee-like scream, the shockwave of which pushed Kendra back and knocked her out of her spinning attack. Sakaratella then moved in on Kendra and got in on her from behind and wrapped her whip around the vice captain. One of the skulls opened its mouth and bit into Kendra's arm. Kendra was strangled too tightly to break free. Sakaratella lifted her free hand and gestured towards an area in the air in front of Kendra. A wooden coffin appeared that looked like it had withered away. The cover opened, revealing spikes on both the inside of the coffin and the door. Kendra could foresee what was about to happen. She kicked her legs to try and break free. "Ah!" Sakaratella said and moved her hands erratically about in front of her like a witch in front of her cauldron. The skulls separated, linked by bonds of Ryotsu, similar to how Renji's Hyozabamera worked, binding Kendra completely. A whip of pure green energy appeared off the end of one skull and connected to Sakaratella's hand. She played with Kendra like a yo-yo as she spun her out and spun her back again, dizzying the vice captain, and then, after a few times, snapped the vice captain straight into the coffin and slammed it shut. "I told you that playtime was over, darling. You should have released your sword when you had the chance," Sakaratella said and called for her skulls as they phased through the coffin and reformed along Sakaratella's whip. The Fraxion began to make her march towards her opponent to confirm her death. However, a true assassin never died from such cliché tricks. As Sakaratella marched forward, an echo sounded from within the coffin. "Kill from the shadows, Akuma Ansatsu." The coffin suddenly turned to splinters and Kendra emerged in Shikai form, slimmed down, face mask, hairpins and shoelace-style braids, short jagged dagger, the entire thing. She appeared to have received little to no damage from impacting with the coffin. "No, you should at least have 1 or 2 puncture wounds," Sakaratella marveled. "One good thing about being a member of the Onmitsukido is we know how to land properly. I've got a few scratches on my legs and hands, but your coffin is so roomy I managed to keep myself from getting punctured too badly." Kendra smirked behind her face mask. "Damn bitch." Sakaratella sent out her whip again, but Kendra was far too fast to be hit by it this time and vanished into thin air and appeared right behind Sakaratella before smashing her leg into her spine. Bones cracked as a result. Sakaratella doubled over and Kendra came down from above, creating a nasty gash along her shoulder, nearly cleaving it off. The Fraxion screamed in pain as Kendra landed down on her left side. Kendra turned and cracked high-kicked Sakaratella in the jaw. "Oh, shut up." The Arrancar recoiled and Kendra let drive a fist into the Arrancar's solar plexus as she coughed up blood and went flying back. Kendra rushed in on her, but Sakaratella gained control of herself and opened her mouth to fire a Zero, charging it in between her fangs. "I don't think so," Kendra declared fiercely and leapt into the air. She held her dagger above her head and charged spirit energy into it, setting it aflame. "Rain down." She slashed downward as 5 fireballs ejected from her Zanpakuto and slammed into Sakaratella before she had time to fire her Zero, creating 2 burns on her upper arms, one on the left side of her abdomen, one on her face, and the last hit her just above her left ankle. Sakaratella hissed and sent her whip up at Kendra as she came flying in from above, but the patrol corps leader did an aerial swerve to the side. "In my time as a vice captain I've trained with both Kukaki Hisanosama and Aburai-san as vice captains, both use a whip as their primary weapon. I must say that compared to them, yours is by far the least effective." Kendra landed past Sakaratella and entered into a crouched position behind her as she created a deep wound along the Arrancar's abdomen before jamming her dagger into the center of the Arrancar's back, just beneath her hollow hole. Sakaratella gagged up blood. "Give it up, you can't hope to win against me," Kendra said and turned around to her opponent's back. "I'm going to give the kill blow on my next strike, you should remain still as possible and pray for a painless end." Sakaratella smiled and snickered and then full-out laughed at Kendra's declaration. "Kill me in the next blow? You? Absurd." Sakaratella turned and fired her whip forward. "You filthy Soul Reaper." Kendra disappeared and Sakuratella watched as several cuts appeared along her whip and all the skulls were cleaved in half. Kendra stood behind her once again, twirling her dagger like it was the barrel of a gun. She gripped it as it made another revolution to face down towards the ground. "I told you, you should have asked for a painless end." With a burst of shunpo, Kendra appeared while Sakuratella was in shock of seeing her skulls destroyed, and as she passed by her created a nasty gash from straight the top of her right shoulder, diagonally straight through her chainmail, down to her left hip and along it to the front of her body. Sakuratella looked at her as she began to lose the feeling in her body from extreme blood loss. Kendra turned to look at her with compassionless eyes. Sakuratella fell from the sky towards the ground. "Don't worry," Kendra said as she looked at where her defeated enemy had fallen. "It's fatal." Back at the northeastern pillar, Naomi was doing well in her battle against Maria. Neither had taken any significant damage and Naomi could be said to have the upper hand since she was playing excellent keep away. Every time Maria struck, Naomi would counter with a swing from her tonfa, which would push Maria back. It was one power of her Zanpakuto, extra wind force accented Naomi's strikes, blowing back and destabilizing the opponent. As Naomi blew Maria away from her into the air above and in front of her, the black-haired Arrancar stood her ground irritated. "How can such a ditzy, easily distracted kid get the better of me? I mean, just look at her." Maria watched as a dragonfly flew around Naomi's head and she watched it with interest. "Honestly, how is that not having your guard down? This bitch has some retarded ass reflexes." Naomi watched the dragonfly fly away. "Bye, Mr. Dragonfly." She waved. She then turned her attention to Maria with a serious look, holding up her tonfa while creating a right angle with her elbow between her fist and shoulder. Naomi then disappeared and attacked Maria from behind. "Top you!" Gust, a burst of green energy shot forth from her weapon at Maria as Naomi swung her arm as if holding a sword, despite the fact that the blade faced towards her in her case. Maria got hit right in the back and turned and struck at Naomi with her hatchet, but Naomi was already gone. Borrowing a page from her Fukotaiko's book, Naomi came at Maria from above, but instead of using her blade she made to kick Maria from 3 different angles, then she rushed the Arrancar when the Fraxion dodged to the side, bashing her in the head with a quick strike as she crossed her right arm over her body. Maria got cut in her forehead. Naomi folded her arms and looked up and to the side. "Now what's she up to? Could you use your resurrection already so I can go all out? I'm getting bored." Naomi whined. "What did she just say?" Maria asked, crazed. "You little brat." Maria grumbled. "Are you telling me you're not even coming at me with full force?" Naomi nodded over enthusiastically with a smile. "You see, the 2nd Division is a little weird compared to the others. Teiko has to set up the senior officers according to who would be in charge of the branches of the Onmitsukido." Naomi bopped herself on the head. "I'm nowhere near as skilled as Otomaka Fukotaiko, but at the same time Teiko says I'm not responsible enough to take on such an important role to be in charge of the STRU or disciplinary enough to be in charge of the detention unit, so that's why I'm just the 5th seat." Naomi giggled and then took a stance, "But I'm actually a much better fighter than Yolanda or Samakura-senpai." "You want my release form?" Maria grit her teeth. "Very well." She smiled proudly and declared, "Then feast your eyes on my incredible might that has served Spargasama so very well for so long." "Hunt down and destroy." Maria swung her axe down with one hand and then slapped her gripped hand with her open left palm. "Ginoid." "Ginoid." Maria's form twisted and warped. Her mask fragments that originally made up the scar on her right cheek formed into an eye patch on her left eye. The iris of said eye glowed red and the sclera turned black. A segment of the patch followed down across her nose and down her right cheek. Another segment went back behind her ear, wrapping around her head and connecting back over across the top of her head, entering down her face from her forehead and connecting to her eye from the opposite corner. She was wearing a shirt that didn't cover her midriff, but shows no cleavage as it covers her neck, but was sleeveless. Several bracelets went up Maria's arms, starting at her wrist and ending near her shoulder. They were bound tightly to her skin, squeezing her flesh. Maria was wearing shorts and there were leg braces around her legs. She was wearing regular white as opposed to the traditional footwear. Her left eye functioned like a bionic robot's eye, analyzing Naomi's Ryutsu and parameters. Maria was no longer holding a weapon. Bring it on. Naomi lurched forward, but the muscle movement was recorded in Maria's eye and she easily sidestepped Naomi's attack. What? Maria smirked and punched Naomi from underneath with her first, launching her higher into the air. Maria disappeared in a flash and appeared above Naomi and smashed her fist into Naomi's back, sending her flying back down. She disappeared and cut across at Naomi from the side, punching downwards, before cutting across and delivering an uppercut to her chin before kicking her in the stomach and disappearing and kicking her in the back of her head before hitting her so hard in the shoulder that Naomi spun before Maria tripped and uppercut her, causing her to spin on an axis similar to the planet Uranus. Maria then appeared above Naomi and charged energy in front of her eye. 0. The blast of red energy blasted through Naomi and sent her blasting into the ground. Maria sonitoed to the ground. The surroundings of both fighters was that of a forest clearing near a metal fence on one side overlooking a cliff. Naomi was face down on the ground in quite a bit of pain. You didn't stand a chance, girl, Maria said and pointed to her eye. My release forms eye reads muscle movement and the flow of Ryotsu, largely reducing the effectiveness of Kido and Hakuta used against me. Maria approached Naomi as she seemed to be just laying there. I can tell when you punch and when you kick, when you use Hado and when you use Bakudo. A non-Mitsukido like you stands no chance against me. I've seen your Zanpakuto. It's nothing special. You are no match for me, girl. Actually, Naomi said, grunting to get to her feet, you've barely seen my Zanpakuto. She turned around, covered in wounds, the sleeves of her kosid and the legs of her hakama torn, with the chest of her kosid completely destroyed, leaving only her shitagion in that area. One of her eyes were closed as she smirked. So far I've only used just the basics of my Zanpakuto. I told you before that when you released your form I would show you the true power of my Zanpakuto. You see, Naomi held up her Zanpakuto, right now it's just a mass of uncontrolled energy. It's perfect for blocking and weaker opponents and it can do the basic firing of my top U attack, but it lacks the true, sleek power of an assassin. Allow me to show you what happens when I condense it and take command of all my fighting potential. Naomi held up her Zanpakuto and the energy around the tonfa began to condense and then the weapon flashed. The handle became solid while the blade appeared to be laser-like in appearance, shaped like the fang of a wolf or the talon of a bird or quite possibly the claw of a tiger. Simply put, it was sharp and sleek. Are you ready? Naomi asked. She disappeared faster than Maria's eye could read and 3 lacerations appeared along Maria's body, one across her torso, one along her shoulder and upper arm and a small scratch on her upper arm. What? It seems your little scouter thing didn't pick me up, Naomi said and turned around. Am I too fast for you to read? Naomi asked. Don't be so conceited. Maria shot forward, but Naomi disappeared. Maria turned only for Naomi to kick her right in the chest and smacked her against the metal fence. Following that, Naomi tore through the metal fence with her tonfa. A burst of wind energy trailed behind her, blasting a blade tip-shaped hole through Maria's abdomen and sent her straight through the fence. What was that you were saying earlier about being able to predict my movements? Naomi asked, holding up her tonfa and staring straight at Maria as she clutched her wound. Impossible, how did she suddenly get so fast? How are you so much better than me? Maria shouted. I'm not better than you. Naomi said and reappeared on the other side of Maria, twirling her tonfa handle with her wrist like it was a whisk. All of the bracelets on Maria's left arm shattered, shocking her. When you suddenly decided you were better than me, when you gave into your arrogance that I was a weak, defenseless soul reaper, that is when you lost. Naomi said. What? Maria said. Naomi folded her arms. I dunno, sounded better in my head. Really? Naomi shrugged, I guess you just suck. You little bitch. Maria freaked out and fired a balla straight at Naomi. Using her tonfa, Naomi split it in half. Top you. The gusting blast smashed into Maria and caused her to recoil. Time for the finisher. Using her shunpo, Naomi split into 3 and dashed towards Maria, shuffling as she did so. I can't tell which one is the real one or if they're all real. 2 of the Naomis split around and flanked Maria. Top you. They announced in unison, popping her into the air. They then launched together, simultaneously at Maria's launched, spinning form, coming in at fast speeds. They passed through Maria, creating 3 deep lacerations, 2 horizontal and 1 vertical, finishing her off. Torn apart and decimated, Maria fell from the air, and the real Naomi, the one that had flanked Maria's left side, stood on the air and folded her arms as she sealed her Zanpakuto. She then spread her arms apart, twirled her blade and quickly sheathed her blade. It does not matter predator or prey, for a cornered rat will bite the cat. She thought about what she just said and then scratched her head. I gotta work on my one-liners. Down at the southeast pillar, Renji and Nigel were continuing their battle of the inexperienced, but powerful. Each had already inflicted 1 injury on the other. Nigel had, with his chainsaw, sliced off a segment of the side of Renji's shoulder, and the red-haired vice-captain had managed to create a shallow slash along the middle of Nigel's torso. As Nigel deflected Renji's 3rd strike and Zabumaru retracted to its sealed state, the two stared at each other with fierce determination. "You're pretty good for a greenhorn," Nigel remarked. "Only as a vice-captain. I've spent more than 45 years as a fully fledged Soul Reaper. I'm more than a match for you," Renji declared. "Oh yeah, well let's see if you're still talking so big after you've seen my release form." Nigel grabbed his weapon with both hands and swung it at the ground so that the chainsaw was only inches above the top of the pillar he and Renji were standing on. "Grab, La Guerra." The claw, his Zanpakuto, broke into white pieces of shrapnel that then coated his body. Nigel's right hand turned into a multi-segmented gauntlet and his left hand transformed into a chainsaw. Both were connected to armor along the center of his body, shirt gone, like ivy up the side of a building. His legs turned into thick, armored greaves with chainsaw teeth running up the front of them. "Take this." Nigel reached back with his right hand and then thrust it forward. The segments of the gauntlet detached and expanded as the palm of the object tore towards Renji and blasted a hole right in the upper segment of his chest. As if that weren't bad enough, Nigel then used the wound he had created and locked into Renji, pulling himself towards the vice-captain like a grappling hook and digging his chainsaw arm right into Renji's lower right abdomen. The 6th Division vice-captain screamed in pain. Nigel removed both of his arms from Renji's body and then made to chop off Renji's head with his chainsaw arm, but Renji put up Zabumaru to block, barely. "Die! Die! Die! Die!" Nigel chanted as he struck forward with his chainsaw arm multiple times. Renji was becoming overpowered with every blow. His wounds were serious and this Arrancar had powered up excessively. "Damn it! This is bad. If I don't break away soon, I'm screwed. I have to do something," Renji thought to himself. "What's wrong?" Nigel taunted as he continued to hack away at Renji. "Don't tell me this is all you've got." "Oh that's right, as long as I keep on you like this, you can't take the time necessary to release your Bankai, can you?" He laughed. "Well I guess that just means you suck, Abarai Renji." Hearing himself insulted, Renji got pissed off and took on to the offensive, slashing with Zabumaru and cutting Nigel right in the neck. The Arrancar backed off at Renji's anger to escape the increasing riot. "So that does it. I am sick and tired of people looking down on me. I am sick of people treating me like I'm garbage, like I don't deserve the title I have. Ever since Rukia was adopted into the Kukaki family, my life has hit a never-ending stream of bad luck, failures, and problems. Well, it ends today. I'm not about to end here. And I'm certainly not about to let a crazed little upstart like you get the better of me. Bankai. Oh damn." Nigel thought to himself. The screech of Renji's Bankai as it released was heard and the gigantic, bony snake-like weapon appeared. "Hiyo Zabumaru." Renji sent out the head of his Bankai as it snaked towards Nigel. With his gauntlet, Nigel stopped Hiyo Zabumaru with his bare hand, trying to push it back, but Renji simply pulled his Bankai back and then slammed it into the Arrancar's torso before Zabumaru opened its mouth and clamped down on Nigel's side. "This isn't over." Nigel aimed his gauntlet at the ground and grappled himself towards the top of the pillar, pulling Zabumaru with him. Then he used his chainsaw arm and tried to cut his way out of Zabumaru's head, but his chainsaw merely buzzed against the half-organic creature's jaw. "What? Looks like you can't break free. And it's to be expected. Zabumaru is an extension of me. All of its composition is my Ryotsu taken form and the bonds between its segments are made from my Ryotsu, separable at will. You're trapped." "I don't think so." Nigel said and charged a Zero at Renji. Heh, idiot. Controlling Zabumaru, while Nigel was still charging his Zero, Renji discombobulated the Aaron car as the snake-like Bankai thrashed about and then cascaded the length of Zabumaru off the edge of the pillar, forcing Nigel's Zero to fire harmlessly into the air. With another motion, Renji directed Zabumaru to throw Nigel with excessive force, the air current keeping him off balance. He then shot forward Zabumaru towards Nigel as the giant creature opened its mouth again. Hikote Soteho. Ah, aiaiaic. Nigel was blown to bits and disintegrated by the attack. Renji sealed his Bankai and put his sword away. Good work, Zabumaru, he said as he stroked the handle of his sword the way one would a house pet. He then looked off the pillar into the distance. It looks like things might start to look up for you and me from here on out. However, while Renji's luck was high on the jackpot, Ikeko was tanking and badly. He had yet to break through Karthus armor at all and had been punched several times. He had 3 bruises on his torso, at his right abdomen, right in front of his heart, nearly rupturing an artery, and would have had a couple of cracked ribs if Karthus hadn't hit the cartilage. He also got socked in the left side of his face and Karthus had put his foot in the center of his stomach. But even so, Ikeko still kept on kicking. Give up, Soul Reaper, you don't stand a chance. Karthus told Ikeko. Sorry, but in Squad 11 you're not beaten until you're dead. Ikeko said. I see, how very hollow-like. We fight to our last breath as well. Karthus said. How interesting, not that I care much. Ikeko let out a fierce battle cry and charged towards Karthus. The big guy sidestepped Ikeko's Shikai, grabbed it, crushed it in his fist and then smashed his head into Ikeko, causing Ikeko to reel. Karthus then smashed his fist into Ikeko's stomach and popped him into the air, then jumped into the air after Ikeko and smashed him to the ground, pressing his palm into Ikeko's back. He stomped on Ikeko's head. He charged a Zero. You are beaten, any last words, Soul Reaper? Karthus asked. Ikeko's worried look suddenly changed as Lelich's orders from Geese rang in his head. If you are about to die against Talbumasuk's forces, you will use your Bankai. The mission comes before your pride. Yeah, Ikeko said as the Geese took hold. Just one Bankai. The energy surge forced Karthus to back off immediately as Ikeko rose to his feet and a whirlwind surrounded him as he prepared to unleash his Bankai. It died down and Ikeko was seen holding a monk's spade and a guandu in his hands connected to giant blade, by chains, floating behind him. Ryumen Hojikamaru. At this point Ikeko came to his senses and then noticed that he was using his Bankai. When did I, why did I? Karthus interrupted his thoughts. Bankai I see, so that's why you were chosen to guard this pillar. Ikeko thought back to the conversation he had with Lelich. Did he do something to me to force me to use Bankai when I was in a jam? Well, I guess there's no contemplating it now. What's done is done, but, Lamperouge Teiko, I'm going to give you hell for making me go against my mottos. You're darn right it is. Ikeko boasted, though he was disappointed somewhat to learn that Lelich had chosen him because of it. In truth, had Lelich not had the knowledge of Ikeko's Bankai he would have had either Shihei or Yachiro guarding the pillar. So let's go. Ikeko charged into battle and attacked with the spade, slicing through Karthus' armor and cutting into him as the Aaron car blocked. Well, what do ya know, maybe this wasn't such a bad forced release after all. Ikeko grinned. Karthus threw a punch, but Ikeko blocked with the guandu, the impact didn't even crack the weapon. Ikeko grabbed both weapons and stepped back and swung down with his spade before following up with a low to high slash from the guandu. Karthus' armor was broken through by Ikeko's swings. He's strong. Karthus realized. In fact, I feel him getting stronger as the battle progresses. Ikeko began twirling the central blade, sending the spade and guandu spinning like swings at a carnival ride. The whirlwind caused Karthus to realize that only had one option to completely pound Ikeko into the ground. It is unfortunate that I must use it on someone that is not a captain, but Ciel-sama would not be pleased with me if I did not use it now. Karthus reached behind his back and grabbed his weapon as Ikeko charged up Ryumen Hojikamaru. Excruciate, Guerrero. Warrior, Ikeko was knocked off balance and he rolled backwards across the top of the pillar as Karthus' armor exploded off of him. Ikeko quickly got to his feet to see what had occurred. Still wearing the same ripped jeans, Karthus was standing mightily with his grey-red skin and hairless head. His hollow hole was now visible as a hole in the top right part of Karthus' head where his brain would be. His Zanpakuto had merged into his arm. His hand was now a blade glowing red-hot as if seeping with lava. Karthus was now 8 feet tall and had an 8-pack, and was slimmed down and toned up. His mask fragments were now just a single cracked fragment along the top of the right side of his forehead going across and down towards the bridge of his nose and stopping just at his eyebrows. He had a flame tattoo on his right pectoral. Along Karthus' left and right arms and along the smooth areas of his toned muscles, spaced well apart, even on his back, were small feelers that whipped around erratically. Time to die. Karthus charged towards Ikeko and attacked faster than the third seed could blink. With a swing of his sword he sliced right through Ikeko's guandu, shattering it to pieces. Ikeko swung at Karthus with his spade, but Karthus grabbed it with his bare hands, not even getting cut, and squeezed. The weapon cracked and was crushed to dust in Karthus' bare fist. Ikeko grabbed the giant central blade, and cut across Karthus' stomach, but it just scrapped against his arrow, not doing any damage. Ikeko was floored, not knowing what to do. "You're finished," Karthus told him. He punched Ikeko in the head and sent him tumbling off the pillar. He then charged Asiro using his weaponized arm and blasted Ikeko straight into the ground. Ikeko got up as Karthus dropped to the ground in front of him. Ikeko took another swing at Karthus, with both hands on his central blade, but Karthus swung his lava blade arm, slashed it half. "Die," Karthus said, and then drove his blade arm straight into Ikeko's chest and out the other end. The wound was fierce and the burning blade made it even worse, creating a fierce burning sensation that seared the top layer of tissue of Ikeko's lungs. Everyone sensed Ikeko's defeat. His backup, as chosen by Lelouch, Seijin, and Shisato, made haste towards the area. The captain decided it was best he engaged the enemy and Shisato would help Ikeko. However, when they arrived on the scene they saw Ikeko on the length of Karthus' arm. "Ikeko!" Shisato screamed in panic. The Fraxion slumped Ikeko off his arm. Seijin charged at him and engaged the Arrancar in battle, taking the fight elsewhere. Shisato knelt down at Ikeko's side in shock. There was so much blood. Yesterday they had decided to take their rivalry/friendship to a different level. They had started a relationship. They had copulated. It couldn't all be over. Ikeko twitched and opened his eyes. He could barely see, but he couldn't mistake Shisato's blonde hair and red eyes as she hunched over him, crying as her head blotted out the sun from the angle he was at. Ikeko reached up with all of his strength and stroked the side of Shisato's face, letting her tears gather on his finger. He brushed her cheek with his thumb. "Hey babe," he said to her, "why the funeral fountain?" he asked, referring to the tears falling from her face. "Oh Ikeko," Shisato smiled, "there's life left in you yet. Anohana or one of our healers can patch you up." Ikeko blinked. "Shisato, where did you go, are you still there?" Ikeko asked. What are you saying?" "Of course I'm still here." She grabbed his arm with her hands. "Can't you feel my hands, can't you see my face?" Shisato asked. "Damn, is it really that bad?" Ikeko wondered. He could still hear Shisato's voice, but he couldn't see or feel her. "So this is it, huh? Looks like my luck's run out." Ikeko closed his blinded eyes. Before he lost all sensibility he noticed something. He could still sense Shisato's Ryutsu, but there was more. Several decimeters from where he could sense her soul he sensed another. It was faint, barely noticeable, but it had a sense of nostalgia from the sensation. Ikeko, if he had the strength, would have laughed. Instead a wide smile crossed his face. His last thoughts, his final memory, were of a self-inscribed vision of the future. Ikeko could almost see Shisato's stomach growing, the baby in her arms, a little boy that looked like him, with blonde hair, doing the lucky dance. "Yeah," Ikeko thought, "that's a good final thought, a future, fit, for, you, Shisato." Ikeko's lover almost missed it when Ikeko's mouth formed two simple words to convey his feelings, before his body could no longer hold his life together. "Ikeko." Shisato called his name. He didn't even twitch. "Ikeko." Firmly she grabbed his shoulders and sobbed, lamenting her loss. She controlled herself as quickly as she could, after all, this was a battlefield. She stood up and sucked back her tears. She crossed her hand over her heart. She looked at the sky with a scowl. You lived and died as you desired. I will make sure you are not forgotten, you brave, brave man you. Shedding one last tear, Chisato turned to leave her lost love's body behind. Farewell, Ikeku, my love. Seijin and Karthus continued their battle giant to giant when Seijin noticed that he couldn't sense Ikeku anymore. I see, so Madarame is no longer with us. This is a great loss indeed. His senses snapped back to the battlefield as Karthus' blade arm clanged against Seijin's Zanpakuto. You had best keep your wits about you, nameless captain, or you will die just like your comrade. Karthus told Seijin. Nameless? Ah yes, how rude of me. Seijin slid across the air and looked at Karthus. I am the captain of Squad 7, Komamura Seijin. I see. Will you release your Bankai, captain? Karthus asked and swung his blade arm out at his side. You know that you will die if you don't. You didn't even have to ask. I didn't want my Ryotsu to make Ikeku's condition worse, but seeing as how that's not going to matter, I have no qualms about releasing it. Feast your eyes, Aaron Carr, behold my Bankai. Bankai! Seijin shouted, and the giant samurai that was his Bankai appeared. Kokyujo Tenjin Myo. That thing's pretty big. But size never matters. Karthus charged forward towards Seijin only to be swatted by the samurai's left hand. I see, big and powerful, huh? No matter. Karthus vanished in an instant and came from above at the samurai using Sonito. He straightened out his right arm and put his left hand on his right arm. Zero. He blasted the energy straight into the giant's face. Seijin blocked with his sword only for it to chip. Karthus smirked. As I thought, this one is no match for me either. I am enough to conquer this entire battlefield. The samurai's arm went shooting towards Karthus. He sidestepped it with ease and slashed up, cutting off the samurai and Seijin's hand. I see, so the giant's damage is reflected in the wolf man's. How inconvenient for him. Karthus shot towards Seijin like a rocket. Seijin swung at Karthus with his giant's sword, but Karthus bashed it away with his weapon hand and dove straight towards Seijin. This ends now. Karthus got right in Seijin's space. Zero. The red hollow flash tore right into Seijin at point blank, blasting a hole in him the size of car tire. Seijin dropped from the air and tumbled towards the ground. Anohana was already on her way. Seijin wasn't burning inside, so, if she was lucky, and she only had a 1 in 5 chance, she could recover the wolfish captain. 2 down. Anybody else? Karthus asked to the air. Suddenly a fierce, blood-hungry Ryotsu stepped up to the field. Karthus turned around to see the grinning demon of the Soul Society standing behind him. Lelich, recognizing the issue with the enemy at the southwestern pillar, decided to break out the big guns and not screw around. Karthus was going down and Lelich had just the man for the job. With his spiked hair, eye patch, sleeveless Haori and chipped sword, Karthus' third opponent stepped up to the battlefield. So, you're the one that beat Ikeku, huh? This should be fun. Who are you? Karthus asked. I'm the captain of Squad 11, Zaraki Kenpeki. And you? Kenpeki asked. Karthus Daragaz, Fraxion to her ladyship Cielo Mito. Karthus answered. I see, well then, Karthus, let's have some fun. Kenpeki said and charged forward towards the powerful Aaron Carr. He swung with extreme force, but Karthus dodged. Karthus took a swing at Kenpeki's face, but barely managed to elicit a scratch along the bridge of the captain's nose. What? Kenpeki slashed at Karthus again, creating a deep gash in the Aaron Carr's left arm. Karthus struck back with his right arm, slicing Kenpeki. Kenpeki slashed Karthus with his sword down the center of his chest. For each wound Karthus gave Kenpeki, though it festered, Kenpeki delivered one twice as worse. What's the matter? Don't tell me this is all you've got. Kenpeki declared. He swung at Karthus beneath his collarbone line, spilling blood. Man, this is boring. Kenpeki said. I can't believe Lelich sent me to kill a pissant like you. You've barely put any real damage on me. Real damage? He's covered in scratches. Kenpeki had dozens of small wounds all along his body while Karthus had large lacerations up and down his torso and arms. The Arrancar was obviously in far worse shape. I know. Kenpeki grinned. Hit me with your Siro. That'll make it interesting. You want my Siro? I'd be happy to oblige. Karthus said and charged the energy in his blade arm and fired it at Kenpeki while the two were less than 10 feet apart. Kenpeki didn't even move. Pathetic fool. Karthus said, only to gasp when he realized Kenpeki was still standing. The extent of his Siro's damage was tearing through Kenpeki's Shiakusho and putting a small, 2-inch radius circle of damage into Kenpeki's skin at the center of his ribcage. That it? Kenpeki asked with a grin. For the first time in his life Karthus felt fear. Well, guess it was. Too bad, I was kind of hoping for more. This man is a demon. He took my Siro at point blank. This can't be. Karthus shouted in his head. If that's your best shot then you ain't gonna last much longer. Kenpeki said and flared his Ryotsu. I will not go down. Karthus shouted and the two clashed swords again. Karthus swept underneath Kenpeki as the demon captain swung down with his sword and flanked to his left-right side and slashed him along his right arm, but Kenpeki smacked the blade of his sword like an axe blade into Karthus' back. Karthus turned and made to stab Kenpeki in his left eye with his blade. Kenpeki saw this and rather than lose his eye, pivoted and stabbed Karthus in the exact same location he had gotten Ikeku. This irony is not lost on me. Karthus coughed up blood. Kenpeki removed his sword as Karthus dropped to his knees. He wiped his mouth and got back up. Man, you sure are stubborn. You can't beat me, yet you keep getting back up. Kenpeki said, putting his blade on his shoulder. Of course I keep getting back up, I am a war machine in allegiance to her ladyship Cielo Mito, I will not fall. For her sake, I refuse to fall. Karthus huffed. TCH, man, what a joke. Is this Cielo person really worth protecting? Kenpeki asked. Of course she is. There is no hollow, no Arrancar, worthier of praise than the magnificent Queen of Poison. She is a monarch better than the King of Hollows, His late Majesty Baragan Lusenburn. I am her sworn protector and loyal follower. And Kenpeki got bored and slashed Karthus down the left side of his body. Geez, I just asked a question, I didn't ask for your life story. Kenpeki said. Pfft, how boring. Kenpeki took his sword and swung along the center of Karthus' body, cutting deep into his torso and hacking off his arms at the elbows. Cielo-sama, forgive me, I have failed you. These were Karthus' last thoughts as he fell to the ground. Kenpeki sighed and shouted as loud as he could so that Lelich might hear him. Hey! He's dead. Now what? Back at the center of the battlefield, Lelich and Talbumasuk were eyeing each other down. Talbumasuk rose from his throne. Well, that was amusing. Talbumasuk said, getting to his feet, but I did accomplish my secondary objective. What secondary objective? I count 1 dead third seat, 1 heavily injured captain, 4 dead Arrancar and no destroyed pillars. Lelich said. Oh, but you see, 1 dead enemy is all I needed. Everyone was so panicked when Madare Mikeku died that they all gave away their positions. I know exactly where everyone is. Talbumasuk said. Lelich turned wide-eyed at Talbumasuk's expert backup planning skills. I've dreadfully underestimated him. Talbumasuk lifted his arm into the air again. Phase 2 of the battle was about to begin. All forces, attack. To be continued. Check the description for the links to the author.